Good evening. I would like to call to order the Keizer Budget Committee. It is Monday, May 13th, 2024. And ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Kathy Clark.
Here.
Sarita Cross.
Here.
Lori Christopher.
Here.
Jane Erb.
Here.
Robert Hessman.
He is marked absent until he arrives.
Kyle Duran.
Here.
Daniel Kohler.
Here.
Susan London.
Here.
Melissa Martin.
Here.
Matthew Stahlheim.
Here.
Shani Starr. Here. Laura Reed.
Here.
Jonathan Thompson.
Here.
Lane Wilson.
Thank you very much. We're going to start off tonight with volunteer appreciation. And Leslie Ricewick is here representing the Volunteer Coordinating Committee. And for Volunteer Appreciation Month, which was April, but you know what? We meet in May, so we're celebrating in May. Thanks for being here, Leslie.
On behalf of the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, we wanted to say thank you for your dedication to the city and the time commitment that you've put into Budget Committee. And I've got cookies, but there's a lot more people than there are cookies, so I want you all to share. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Yeah, we just had, we provided our dinner. We'll put them in back, and when we go to a break, or need to stretch, or need a cookie break, we know where to get them, but we appreciate it, and thank you so much. Thank you. All right, and now I would like to open the floor for nominations for the election of Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair. And I would like to open the floor for nominations for Chair.
I nominate Daniel Kohler for chair.
Dan Kohler has been nominated. Is there a second for the nomination?
Second.
We have second, third, and fourth. Any other nominations? Motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Need a second? Second. The nominations moved and seconded to close. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Election of Dan Kohler as the Budget Committee Chair. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. All right, motion passes unanimously. Anybody who voted no is probably going to be made Vice Chair. I'll pass the gavel to Councilor Kohler, who will take over the meeting as the Chair of the Budget Committee. Congratulations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the committee, it's now time to nominate a Vice Chair. I have a nomination for Vice Chair. Mayor Christopher.
I nominate Jonathan Thompson.
Do we have a second?
I second.
I move nominations, or any other nominations for Vice Chair. I move nominations be closed.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Can we vote on Mr. Thompson as vice chair?
I was fixing to.
Okay, just checking.
You got it. Oh, no.
Okay, those in favor of Jonathan Thompson as vice chair, so
I move to nominate Jonathan Thompson as vice chair of the budget committee.
It's been moved and seconded.
that has
Yeah.
been done.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right.
Thank
Got it.
you. All right, so I appreciate your patience with me as I try to figure out what I'm doing. This is the second time I've chaired a committee like this, and I appreciate your patience, and we'll get through this. So we were going to make some jokes about the chair and vice chair and being chaplains together and doing things, but we'll get to that maybe later. I move to approve the fiscal year 23 and 24 budget calendar, 24-25 budget calendar.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We need a motion to approve the fiscal year 23-24 budget committee minutes.
So moved.
Second?
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Yes, ma'am.
Can I vote on those if I wasn't here?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Did
I
you read 'em?
abstained too, because I didn't think I could since I wasn't there.
Yeah. We don't know what we're doing either.
Cool.
Company.
Okay. At this point, I call on Mr. Wood, I believe, to talk about general administration. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Brown.
Okay, we tested this out this afternoon, so it wasn't whistling in everybody's ears or more like screaming chalkboard sounds. So I think we're in good shape. So first of all, thank you, all of you, for being here and being part of the budget committee. All of you embody the pride, spirit, and volunteerism that is Keizer. So thank you. This is your precious time. It's not lost on us. This is our jobs, but this is your volunteer hours. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. If you made it through the city manager's budget message, you'll see we made a lot of progress on council goals.
Mr. Wood, it's been suggested you bring your microphone closer. Excuse me.
Test. Thank you. So we have made some progress on the council goals. Just highlighted some of the few ones. We broke ground on the artificial turf fields just this past spring. The codification, which has been a work in progress for a lot of years, is under the second draft. And I know the council members can appreciate that. It's kind of mind-blowing when you come somewhere and see that we don't have an actual city code. We just have a bunch of ordinances that we have to try to track answers down. So that's a big step for Keizer. And we have a human resource information system that is under contract and will be beginning implementation over the next probably 4 months. And we implemented our agenda management system, which I think has really made transparency raised in our community for our records are much more accessible with this. And then lastly, the one I'll highlight is the community center policies were updated this past year. So there's a lot more of those goals that are in the back corner there that we've made progress on a little bit, or some or all on each one of those. As I thought about this budget, as we've worked through it as staff and over the last month or two, the issue of sustainability, and I'm talking specifically about financial sustainability, really arose to me as one of the most important issues. And we don't have to look very far in the news or physically to see where a lot of governments are having financial challenges. Our school district and our neighbor just to the south, and frankly, all of our peers are going through the same thing in every city. It's a bigger issue than in one city, but really what this comes down to is, at the end of the day, is providing services. It shows up multiple times in the mission statement. Keep city government costs and services to a minimum by providing city services to the community. So we want to provide city services and be able to do that sustainably in the future. So there's 5 objectives that I would say we use to try to form this budget. Number 1 is we always, our first priority is to the city council's goals. So the short-term goals, long-term goals, have them on framed in the back corner there. I also have them right next to my computer screen, so I see them every day. That's always number 1 priority for me. And then number 2 is finding a path to fiscal year 2029. Because what happens in fiscal year 2029 is the local improvement district for Keizer Station gets paid off, and we have another $1 million for operating revenue. That will enable us to continue to provide these essential services going forward. So we are looking at a 5-year window out. Third, maintaining the level of the service that our residents desire. And then fourth, not getting behind on capital investment. That's something that's really easy to give up on or to delay, but it's really hard to catch up on once you're behind. So, and then number 5 was closing out on the reporting of the $8.8 million American Rescue Plan Act grant funds. Grab my water here. So those kind of framed the intentionality of this budget and what we wanted to accomplish. This graph here, I think, is really important. We've shared it in numerous places, but it's important to every city and local government school district in Oregon. Because it's the rate that's taxable of the real market value, the percentage taxable value to real market value. So, just to use the example, these apartments that came online this past year up on Verda, they look nice. It does seem a little bit out of place with the character of it, but it was an allowed use. We're going to be taxed, receive property tax only on 51% of the real market value of that facility. The same goes for multifamily, is at 41%, apartments, residential at 51%, and commercial at 74%. So is just a reality. Other people will fight for if they want to change that, but that's not a fight that we can change as a city. It's just something we have to live with.
Can I ask you a question, or do you want me to wait?
I'm okay.
So I don't understand that. I don't understand why new property doesn't come on at real market value. And how are those percentages determined? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so a lot of people are with you, that a lot of people don't understand it, but it's the impact of these three measures, 5, 50, and 47. And the combination of those two is, one, froze the tax rate. Whatever tax rate you had at, was it 1995? In mid-90s was frozen, so ours was frozen at $2.08 per $1,000 of assessed value.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, they said, well, we don't want it to grow more than the cost of inflation or appreciation in property values. So they said the lesser of the consumer price index or property inflation, the lesser of the two, is only what you'll be allowed to grow. So that's the moment where the taxable value started separating from the real market value. And you had this difference. And then the last kind of kicker was when they said, well, we don't want new construction to come on board at the same taxed at the full value. So what we're going to do is approximate everything around that new development, and that's the percentage that we're going to apply to that new development.
And that's 47 that did that?
Yeah.
And so who determines, so the appraiser, the Marion County appraiser determines
Yes.
what the surrounding property is, and that's what they assign to new property?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these rates would come from the Marion County assessor.
So that's what we need to change.
So, like I said, that's not something we can change, and, reverting back to 100% is probably not realistic, so somebody above our level of government is going to have to figure that out. So, for us, it's just what we have to live with, but we also think it's important to mention that each year, that these are the kind of restrictions we're under as a community. Another significant change in this year's budget is, in the past, we have budgeted less than the actual expected cost. So we would take all of the salaries, all the materials and services, contracts, and then budget something less than that. Almost every other place I've been in, every place I know, usually budgets the full cost of the year. That kind of ensures that you're never going to, it's a worst case scenario, that you're never going to go over. But the reality of dealing with Measure 5, Measure 50, Measure 47, is that we have to budget less and then look for savings, try to make it up. We've done that through delayed fills of positions, all kinds of different methods over the last probably a couple of decades to do that. This year, though, we have budgeted the full expected cost. And the logic for that is that we have most of our positions filled, or will have them by the start of the fiscal year. So trying to come in under that, knowing that we have positions that are filled, is going to be harder and harder to do. So that's why this budget is a little different. It's budgeted for all our employees to be here throughout the full year. If there is turnover, then we may see some savings, we may not, because there's usually vacation payouts when there's a turnover. So sometimes we see a savings, sometimes we don't. Okay, so what you will have seen in the budget is that we're a little bit upside down. We have expenses over our revenues. Now, that is okay if you have a strategy. So in the long-range planning task force, a couple months ago, talked to the long-range planning task force about this concept of selling city-owned lands, using the capital to pay down our PERS debt, which gives us a perpetual impact on our expenses, perpetual lowering of our expenses. And then two, use that fund balance to get us to 2029 when we have another $1 million available to the general fund for services. So this is what it looks like graphically. If you looked at every budget where I've been over the last 16 years, you'll probably see a slide that looks something like this. And what this solid area is our ending fund balance. And the dark bar there is our targeted reserve. That's how much we want to have in reserve. Typically, that's around 3 months of operating expenses. And then the yellow bar is where our position is each year, annual surplus or deficiency. So in the past, up until this year, we've come out ahead. We do expect this year to come out negative in using some of that fund balance. But what we've done in this 5-year forecast is make sure that we can use that fund balance to get to 2029 and continue services again about being financially sustainable for our citizens. So I'm going to close with that slide again and just hit a couple of more really elephants in the room or big topics. So again, the ARPA was another item that we wanted to close out. We have to commit those funds by 2024. They have to be spent by 2025. So one of our strategies is a major strategy in this budget is to defederalize the ARPA funding. And the ARPA legislation gives you 2 opportunities or ways to do that. First one is we could say we lost $10 million in revenue because of the pandemic. And you don't even have to justify it. You can just declare that to the federal government. And they gave that minimum threshold of $10 million. So that's one way you can do it. Another way that I think is more common is that we've seen other local governments apply it to general services, like police or planning, other government costs. We took the route of just applying these ARPA funds, what remained of them that hasn't been committed or spent, to general services. The end result of that is that we have fund balance at the end of the year, which we can apply towards some of the critical needs. So let me talk about 2 of those critical needs. The first one is
How much money are you applying then to the general fund?
of ARPA money.
Yeah?
So it is 1.1 million to the general fund,
Okay.
but we also have 1.5 million in there for these 2 items. So
So,
roughly
2.6.
2.6 million left
Okay.
to work with.
okay. And the other balance is committed, so you're leaving it where it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first one is we had budgeted to build a police evidence storage facility in the last year's budget. There's a property that's become available that would serve that need, and also potentially some other needs for us. So we're trying to be opportunistic about it. That's why we haven't gone forward with building that storage unit for the police evidence, because we're waiting on that property. And then the second one is undoubtedly, most of you, hopefully you have heard about our PERS position. It's got some coverage in the news, and we will need some fiscal resources on hand sooner than later to address that. We'll have a long-term funding strategy for that, but there is an immediate need for capital to address it. So those are two real critical issues.
What's the immediate need for capital in the PERS issue?
That's a good question. So when somebody submits for retirement and they get their statement of benefit, this is what your benefit is going to be. There's what's called a dispute of entitlement, that the retiree, that, let's say if he retired from Keizer, or in some cases, these are ones that have already been settled. They retired from somewhere else. They worked for Keizer for, let's say, 10 years, but then they went somewhere else. So their highest 3 years compensation is not a problem. That came with the other organization. But what they will have missed is contributions to a VBA. And that was 6% of the total subject salary. So the issue was we didn't include the 6% contribution to a 457 as subject salary. And so when you combine that, the VBA should have included 6% of that 6%. So that's a smaller number, but for some people that have been there a long time, it adds up. So when they file that dispute of entitlement, PERS will get the reports from us, which we have. We'll upload them to them, and then PERS will say, we need a check. Cover that. Did I cover it for you?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's good to understand. So, another big one here. I hope you'll enjoy the Griswold family Christmas sweater. On the slide, I wanted to get the station wagon with Aunt Edna on top, but it wasn't in the common license use, so couldn't use it. But one thing we wanted to do through this budget is to show the transit lodging tax a little clearer and being better at being transparent about that. We've been kind of working on it actually even this week, in that we want to provide you a document tomorrow that we'll ask you to amend, because what we really want to do is just show it coming in and then showing everywhere it goes out. And in this case, we have all the funds going towards tourism-related opportunities, and then there's some things that are going to come up on the next couple slides that could be placed there, and that's going to be at your discretion. So, well, let's talk about some of those. We have two tables here. One is what we call a non-departmental request, and the next one is ARPA request. So, first of all, the non-departmental, the neighborhood associations, they all said last year they were going to request the same amount, $1,200. They all submitted for $1,200 this year. We just didn't get Southeast Keizer Neighborhood Association, so there's an asterisk there. And at the bottom it says they have done the work required to be recognized by the city as a neighborhood association. They did get us the submission after we had finished the budget. So the staff is not going to have a problem if the council wants to add that back in. It's just $1,200. It's a small deal to us, big deal to them. The request for the Keizer Heritage Foundation, that is something that we could legitimately call transit lodging tax related or tourism related things, because it is, I think, as Councilor Cross told me, the only historic building we have in Keizer. So we've plugged in $20,000. Again, there's going to be some room to play there for you all. We've plugged in $20,000 Keizer United, we have the $2,000 plugged in. They're a group that leverages money from other parties within the community. And every time I go, they seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So interesting group. Keizer Chamber of Commerce, we only have 1,600 in there right now in the manager's recommended budget because that's what our dues are. We got the submission late, and so it wasn't included in the budget, in the manager's recommended budget. They asked for 51,600. The 50,000 is what their ask was. The 1,600 is our dues. Traditionally, over the last years, they've received $40,000 a year. I will tell you that I understand not receiving that $40,000 would be devastating to the chamber. And so staff is, if the budget committee wants to add that in, you won't have opposition from staff on that. But just because it wasn't received in time is why it's not in there. So again, the Keizer Chamber of Commerce is a tourist-related activity that could be applied towards our transient lodging tax. Sometimes those are called TOTE, transient occupancy tax. By state law, they're called transient lodging tax. So those terms are synonymous. Okay, and then this table is ARPA request. These are really all eligible for ARPA. There's some that also could be eligible under transient lodging tax funds too. So we received a request for $20,000 from the Keizer closets. We have over the last 2 years given them $14,700 from our ARPA funds. Because of all the needs this year, most of these haven't been included, but there's some that we would recommend under the transient lodging tax. So CASA of Marion County also asked for $62,700. And we'll go over each one of these requests and what the detail is on them. And I'm just this is more of a preview of it. And then Keizer Community Library asked for $30,000. They got $15,000 last year. And then 2 more requests from the Keizer Heritage Foundation. Again, these ones could be lumped into transient lodging tax or tourism-related expenses. The $13,000 is to help replace their mechanical HVAC. And the $4,200 is to do the outside security of their building.
Safety rails.
And safety rail, thank you. Yep. We have, over the last couple years, taken on the approach. In fact, we've amended our agreement that the city takes on the kind of that outside of the building. So again, these are just a preview. We'll go into more detail. We'll have the actual requests and more specificity as we get into it. So to wrap up the budget message, I go back to this slide of this sustainability, and we want to use that reserve to make sure we can get to 2029. And it's all about providing services, not necessarily saving positions, but we're in the business of providing services. So however we can do that is what we shoot for in the most economical way. And lastly, just special thanks. The work that's in front of you is Tim Wood's product, and our executive team goes over it with him, and he burns a lot of paper providing it to us so that we can go over to him. So thank you to Tim. Thank you to our executive leadership team for spending the time on it. And we are here to assist you through the process. So please use each and every one of us.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. I did it again, Mr. Brown. I'll have that figured out before the end of next week.
No problem.
This time is provided for public testimony. Do you have any requests for public testimony at this time? Do we have a sign-in sheet?
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Is the mic on?
I don't think so.
Thank you. I'm not very tech savvy. Can you hear me?
If it's a red light, you'll see it.
The red light is on. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Do you need me to restate my name?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. Hi, my name is Jessie Zumwalt. I am the library manager at Keizer Community Library. I live here in Keizer, Oregon. Thanks for letting me speak tonight, Budget Committee. I have worked at the Keizer Community Library for the last year, and over that time period, I've gotten to hear a little bit about our history here in the city. And we are a very scrappy and persistent volunteer-led organization, and we're really proud of everything we've been able to offer. I've gotten to see community members step up and support their local children, their teenagers, community members that are aging, by donating their time to keep the library open and running. We know that free and open access to information, education, and community identity are some of the basic services that libraries provide to the communities they serve, and our library has worked really hard to fill in the gaps and meet those needs over the last few years. In 2022, the City of Keizer gave us operating funding, which allowed our library to grow from a small fee-based membership library to a library that's now fully open and accessible to the Keizer community. This funding allowed for the hiring of a part-time contracted manager to recruit, train, and manage library volunteers, and that's the position that I now hold. As a result of this increase in funding, we have seen monthly visitors grow to an average of 700 visitors a month. And in the first 4 months of 2024, we've already had more than 3,350 people through our doors. A small library that in 2021 had only 300 active cardholders now has more than 1,600 active cardholders, people using the library within the last year. That's 1,600 Keizer residents that visit and actively use us. Our collection holds more than 15,000 items, more than 90% of which have been donated by the Keizer community. We have been able to provide hundreds of library cards, thousands of books and DVDs, dozens of educational resources and opportunities, public internet access, computers, classes, kids' arts and crafts, and early literacy programs, all available to the Keizer community for free. At this time, our organization has no guaranteed source of income, and our future is uncertain as the demand for these library services is continuing to outpace our ability to meet them as a volunteer-run nonprofit. Keizer deserves robust library services, and we can see that the community demand is growing. We can no longer meet these needs alone, and so we're coming to your committee and asking for the City of Keizer to support us by contributing in a tangible financial way. We have submitted a request for $30,000 in matching funds from the city as we continue to fundraise and pursue various grants. And our request for funding is modest, but it would allow for the organization to retain a part-time employee in 2025 so that we can continue to sustain the growth that we've had over the last few years. Thank you so much for considering our request.
Thank you for coming. I understand that you have a book sale coming up,
We do, yeah, that's this Friday and Saturday, actually, here in the Civic Center.
and that'll be right here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Robert?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you. Ms. Zumwalt, thank you so much for your testimony. Do you mind talking a little bit more about some of the grants that the Keizer Community Library has applied to and maybe where the library is in the process with regard to grant proposals?
Sure, I could answer that question in part, not in full. I'm not on the budget, don't have any involvement in the budget as far as the board organization goes, but I know that we just received a grant funding for a bilingual outreach coordinator who's come on, and for the next year, they're going to be helping us reach out to Hispanic and Latinx and other Spanish-speaking communities so that we can extend our services better to those communities. We have applied for some different grants that have allowed us to purchase children's books, for example, and if you're wanting to know the specifics of the grant funding, I can happily get you a report on that.
Would be lovely to have. Do you?
Sure.
Quick follow-up, sorry. Do you mind just saying through whom that the bilingual educator librarian grant is through?
I believe Spirit Mountain, yeah?
Spirit Mountain, okay.
Okay.
Beautiful. No, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for testifying.
Thank you. Any other questions? Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Zumwalt, I just want to make sure that it's clear, what you're requesting is a matching, Yes. not,
is a matching amount, so what you bring in is what you would request, not necessarily the full amount up front, and then you don't have to worry about the match, right? So it's-
Exactly,
You would
yes.
turn in, as you get the grants, you would turn in the requests for the matching funds, correct?
That's correct. It's in matching funds, so we would continue to fundraise and get grant funding.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Council President Starr. Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Jonathan Thompson, Jeremy Turner, and Jane Lowry.
So we just get the main attraction, is that the idea? You don't, but you still have to say yours.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Keizer Budget Committee. My name is Jonathan Thompson. I am the Keizer Chamber Board Treasurer. And with me this evening is Jane Lowry, our Board President, and Jeremy Turner, who is co-chair of Keizer Fest. My wife told me I needed to be brief because when you put a microphone in front of a pastor, it tends to go long. So I promised her that we would be quick. Our budget request was emailed to you all last week. I won't go through all the details of it, but I will touch on a few highlights. One of them, there's a request for visitor center support in the amount of just over $28,000. As most of you know, the Keizer Chamber provides the visitor center and we staff it. Staffing alone for that is about $52,000 a year. And so we appreciate the partnership for the city to make that happen. In addition to offsetting some of the cost of staff and rent, the money in our budget request will also help with some updates to the fixtures in the visitor center. We've asked for about $20,000 in rebranding and our visitor guide. This is a guide that we mail to about 13,000 households in Keizer. It's got information about Keizer businesses. It's got information about Keizer. And this budget request will also offset some of the costs of taking that guide online. Also, there's about $1,500 in an ask for a sponsorship for Leadership Keizer. We brought this program back this year for the first time. There's about 18 participants currently in the program. We've partnered with the Keizer Community Foundation and the Keizer Heritage Center to use their space as well, so it's a great community event. And as you can see in your packet, there's been several city leaders involved. We thank you all for that, and we look forward to continuing that as we move forward. Our total request is about $50,000. And as you can see, we're not asking for any of these programs to be fully funded by the city. We're asking to partner. And in this way, we can take TOT or TLT, I guess I learned something new tonight too, and we can stretch those TOT dollars and go from there. If fully funded, our request is right around 10% of our total budget for the year. And now the elephant in the room, as you heard Adam mention, we submitted our request late. I can give you all kinds of reasons about waiting for bids or technical difficulties, but at the end of the day, those are excuses. We were late. As the Apostle Paul wrote to the Ephesians, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving to one another, as God in Christ forgave you. See, it comes out. It's in that spirit that we're here to apologize for the lateness of our submission, and we ask for some grace and that you fully fund our request. We'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Reverend Thompson. Sir, any questions? Mayor Clark.
Thank you. Just a couple, and that's a first. So
We like to be first.
yeah, absolutely. So when I looked and asked the staff to also pull how we've also supported the chamber over
Absolutely.
this in the fiscal year we are in right now with the support for the parades, the Keizer Fest, staff time and so forth. That's also an additional $21,000 and change. So I'm partly saying this to you, but I'm also partly saying it to our community that the city of Keizer has been an active financial partner with the chamber for the purpose of economic development for our community.
Absolutely.
So want to get that out there, and thank you for modeling how a professional business should run, that when something doesn't go quite right, to own it, deal with it, and be very forthright. I think that's a really good example, especially in this day and age, so thank you for that. Can you help me a little bit with the rebranding and visitor guide? This is a cost that I don't remember being in last year's request, but I didn't go back and look at it specifically. What are some of the features that are causing this increase? Because the total that you're asking for is $10,000 more-ish, more than last year.
Well, there's two. One of the things we did as a board last year, in the city's last fiscal year, we redid all of our logos to update them, and so we need to update some signage on the visitor center to reflect that. So that's part of it, and the other part of it is we're moving to not only take the visitor guide online and kind of an online system, but we're also working on some bilingual aspects to that as well. So that's where those costs come in.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hausman.
Thank you, Senor Chair. Mr. Thompson, do you mind giving a breakdown of, within the 51.6, what those costs are? I just want to make sure I have down exactly what the pieces of
Absolutely.
51.6 are.
It's, Mr. Chair, Councilor Hussman, it's in the packet you received as well, but it breaks out as a membership package. I think Adam had it at 1,600. We have it at 574, so it may just be a level change. The visitor guide directory, there's an ad there for about, I think the city does a full page ad, which is about $1,000. The visitor support services that I talked about was $28,400. The rebranding and the visitor guide and directory update and publication is $20,000, and leadership Keizer sponsorship is $1,500.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do your advertising sales of the visitor guide, how much of the cost of production did those pay for?
I'd have to get that number for you. I'm happy to pull that number for you. I don't have it offhand.
Are you adjusting your advertising prices to compensate for the cost of the increased exposure when you take it online versus the printed version?
I don't believe we have changed those prices, no. Did we? I may stand corrected. Hold tight.
I don't know the exact numbers, but I do believe we increased it. We've also seen a significant drop in just sponsorships in many areas, but one of the things we wanted to do was find a more accessible way for people to be able to see these advertisements, and the online guide is going to help that because it has tracking, has the ability for people to see the return on investment when it comes time to look at click rates and things like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming.
All right. Thank you all.
Next up is Lori Christopher for the Cultural Center.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Budget Committee.
State your name and city residence for the record, please.
Lori Christopher, Keizer, Oregon. So I just wanted to take a minute to talk with you about the Keizer Cultural Center. I believe it is transient lodging tax eligible because it directly relates to tourism. But here's what I wanted to tell you, and I'm so glad that I get to follow the Chamber of Commerce because while their costs and their ask went up, ours went down, and significantly, probably enough to cover their up. So the first one is the $26,000, and here's what I want to say. I think this is the best idea that Mayor Clark ever had. This goes back to 2017 when we took our beautiful old Keizer schoolhouse that was having itself beat to death with events, weddings and quinceañeras and wild birthday parties. And so there was always a lot of repair after all of those events. Mayor Clark came up with the idea that we move Keizer Homegrown Theater into that facility and create a 75-seat live theater in our own community. Best idea ever. And the building has never been in as good a shape since that has occurred. So as part of that agreement, whatever our budget was, and in your packets, we've included what our budget is, so you can see exactly what we're spending the money on. The Art Association and the theater pay rent. They pay $900 a month rent for being in that building. City Council has agreed to pay the rent for the museum and for the library because they have no effective way of raising funds. We have monthly art shows in the Art Association and art classes. Theater, of course, has productions. And it's worked out really, really well. We're getting creamed with inflation like everyone else is, utilities, and utilities and tech is really what it is. The city has stepped up and is maintaining the grounds now, which was out of our purview, and I gotta tell you, they're doing a great job. It looks really good, so thank you very much. Our budget this year was $52,000. So as the mayor set up originally in 2017, the city would pay for half of that. And so that's what the $26,000 is. But the increase, that $6,000 increase, that's tech and utilities. Okay, now we'll go to the $13,000, that's air conditioners. We have replaced, during COVID, we didn't sit still. We replaced the furnaces, we did outside painting, we did a new roof. We paid for all of that with our sinking fund. The only thing that has not been replaced are the air conditioners. We had a little scare last year, didn't we, Barb? We had a house full of princesses at 86 degrees, and they were in the theater, and we were all wondering how this was going to turn out. We were able to repair one of the 25-year-old air conditioners. It was about a $1,500 repair, but that doesn't make sense to do because they've exceeded their life expectancy by 5 years. Rotary has already dedicated $6,500 to replace one of them. So that $13,000 that you see in your budget is to replace the other two. If we do it all together, it is less, sorry, I should have waited to suck my mint. If we do it all at the same time, it's less expensive than if we do it one at a time. Additionally, last year, Council President Starr was very angry with us because we were them. We got our budget request in late. This year, we were very early, but we got all of our estimates back early. And so the $4,200 you see is for safety rails. When they built the old Keizer School 25 years ago, they put rails on the ramp, the ADA ramp, and they put rails on the front of the building. They did not, do I have to stop? No. They did not put rails on the stairway that leads to the parking lot. We've had 2 seniors fall. And they did not put safety rails on the stairs that lead to the gazebo. So we have Zane Leak, who was a community member, who attended that school when he was a kid, and the estimate was $3,500.
Now you have to stop.
But I'm not done.
Go ahead.
So the $3,500, he has agreed to donate half back. So $1,750 to complete both of those safety rails on the patio. And the other $2,400, we've had, I can't begin to tell you how significant Oregon Energy Trust has been for the Keizer Cultural Center. I can't begin to tell you. This year, they've replaced our 3 thermostats with energy-saving thermostats. We had a little hiccup, but it's fixed now, right, Barb? It's fixed now because we have separate pods that will read the museum and read the library. So for a while there, we were cooking kids, but now it's cool. And so it's working really well. And they replaced all of our fluorescent lights with
LED lights. The only ones they couldn't replace was in our main public hallway, which is so dark, and it's because those lights are obsolete, so they can't upgrade them with LED. So that $2,400, we had the same Energy Trust vendor give us a bid on that since they've now worked in our building. And the bid was for $2,400 to replace those, and then they'll be LED, and they should be good for the next 25. Here's the big thing. Our attic, the insulation in our attic, when they first put it in 25 years ago, it was on the floor and up the walls. All of the walls had fallen down, and much of the floors had been compromised as well. Energy Trust replaced all of that at the tune of $17,000 for this much money. We've paid nothing. Energy Trust did that. All told, this year, Energy Trust has provided to the citizens of Keizer through the Cultural Center $35,000. So I don't want to ever hear anything bad about Energy Trust. That building gets 15,000 people in it in a year. And they have, I just can't tell you how significant that contribution was. I'm proud to pay more on my PGE bill for them doing that.
Okay, Mayor Clark?
Thank you very much, and just want to add that the Cultural Center is an amazing collaboration of volunteers, community, making the cultural experience available for our entire community. I'm glad I could be a small part of that in the history of Keizer. I'm really excited for the book sale and everything else that's coming up this year. I do want to make one small comment about the budget ask. How the Keizer Heritage Foundation chooses to label the funds coming in your budget. The city of Keizer is not paying, quote, paying the rent for the two organizations. We, the way we set it up in 2017 was that we asked the Heritage Foundation to give us your operating budget only, not the sinking fund, not your capital improvements, just the operation, and we go 50-50. And then how you guys allocate that, if you call it rent, call it something else. And I want to just clarify that for people watching. I know you know that, and I know our representative, Councilor Reed, knows that. But just to be clear, all we ask of the Heritage Foundation is to be, you know, a fiscally responsible in getting us the budget, and that has been a 50-50 ish over the years. So I just want to clarify,
Mayor. You've told me that before, and I'm sorry.
I do have one question, if I can follow it.
Follow up.
So when you did the furnace, was there a recommendation to go ahead and replace the air conditioning? Because oftentimes the thermostats and the systems, if they're not replaced at the same time, or at least in the same decade, in this case, they're not compatible.
There was, and I don't think after the roof I don't think we had enough funds to do both at the same time. And I think we were just slightly shy of that. I want to say $10,000. So we did not do it at that time, knowing that we need the furnace more than we needed the air conditioning. Air conditioning in Oregon is, you know, 2 to 6 weeks at best, but heat is all year round. And we have so much going on in that building, we made that choice. But if we'd had the money, we'd have done it all at the same time. Now, I will tell you, the estimate for those air conditioners is $19,000, but Energy Trust is continuing to help us, and they're right now, the two representatives that I'm working with are taking it to their bosses to see if they can get us an additional $400 savings on each air conditioning unit. And if that's the case, then I will give you back your $1,000.
Thank you, and also thank you to Energy Trust. So just to kind of wrap up my question, then the two systems will be modernized, they'll be compatible with these new thermostats, they will be able to operate the building efficiently for both heating and cooling.
Correct, and the furnaces are 95% efficient, and the air conditioners will be as well, so everything will be, the Energy Trust requires that. So everything will be the best you can buy and the most energy efficient you can buy.
Thank you.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Christopher, on your budget where you said I think I did some fuzzy math and came up with 35,000 in the grants that you're currently applying for. Most of them are for, insulation repairs.
Well, 17,000 was.
Well, insulation repairs, 5,000, insulation repairs, another 5,000, 10,000 insulation repairs, 20, 25, 30, 35 is, you
Kelsey,
have.
what do you-
Oh, 5,000 is lighting upgrades.
What are you
On
reading
here.
from? Can you tell me what you're reading from?
Impact of partial funding.
Oh,
We are
okay.
currently applying for grants for special projects.
Okay.
Additionally, we are currently applying for these grants. Autzen Foundation, 5,000 attic insulation repairs. Starseed Foundation, 5,000 attic insulation repairs. Bloomfield Foundation, 10,000 attic insulation repairs. Kinsman Grant, 5,000 insulation repairs. Reeser Family Grant, 5,000 attic insulation. So that is 30,000 in insulation repairs.
Correct.
Where are you at on getting those grants?
We didn't need any of them because Starseed we did not get and Reeser, Autzen we did not get. But in the meantime, Energy Trust stepped up. And so then we did not need them because it was completely, fully funded by Energy Trust.
Did you make an amendment, ask to Bloomfield, Kinsman, and Reeser
We
then?
told them that it had been funded. So we did not pursue it. We pulled back before they were getting ready to. I don't know if they would have awarded us or not, maybe, maybe not, but we did not need it once Energy Trust.
So you didn't ask them if you could amend your request because the funding came through in another revenue stream?
I'm not sure. Robert Becker, who is our president, he did both of those grants, and so I'm not sure what vehicle he let them know that it was paid for and we wouldn't need the money. I'm sorry, I don't know. I apologize.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Christopher?
Before I leave, I'm the only one here to speak for the Keizer closets too, and that's real easy. I just wanted to tell you that last year at this time, we had 7,800 kids. Audrey calls them touches, and that's requests. The kids go directly to their school counselors to get food and clothing. And so last year, by the end of April, there were 7,800 touches. This year, there were 13,000. And in addition to that, we're paying a lot more for all of those things, like all of you are, because of the inflationary factor. So that's the reason that she has requested that we, instead of 14,700, that we have $20,000. It's not going to do anything more, it's just going to take care of the immediate need. That's it. Oh,
Mayor Clark.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing that up. Has the Keizer Community Foundation been in contact with United Way because they do the resource
Oh,
rooms
yeah.
in the Salem schools? To partner up for the funding opportunities?
yes, but, and we do work closely with them because we get all kinds of requests for different types of things that is outside of our purview. We're strictly food and emergency clothing like coats, shoes, socks. That's really what we do. And so Audrey coordinates and works closely with United Way, but we have never gotten any funding from United Way, but they will take care of some of our needs. So if someone comes to us and we're not able to take care of it, United Way has stepped in and taken care of those needs.
Follow up? So the need is growing, and I don't think anybody who has been paying attention to what's happening in the community, hearing from our food bank and so forth, would argue that point. For the long term, as this need is increasing, can you describe some of the work being done to increase the donation opportunities in our community?
Yeah, so we apply for grants continually. We've just, in our last meeting, which was last week, we just talked about our annual ask, which we're going to go out and we got $8,000 from the community last year. And this year, we've expanded that list and we're working with Kelly Walther to help us with additional grant resources. We know that this is ARPA money, and we don't want to fall off the cliff that a lot of people are falling off, and we don't want to let these kids down. So we know we've got to make a huge transition or not take care of all the kids' needs.
Oh, if I may.
Mayor Clark.
Yes, and, yeah, the ARPA will play out as we are dealing with tonight with many of the city things as well. Going forward, and I don't know how the vote's going to go for the grant itself, but to work with our community partners and Keizer United on what's it going to take to get this level up and achieve our higher cruising altitude, if you will.
Yeah. You know, we were really surprised by the doubling of the need. We really were surprised because we thought the worst that it would ever be was through the COVID years.
Yeah.
So we really anticipated that we were going to be fine and that we would be able to make it through the end of the year and maybe even start the coming year. And that has not borne out. But we keep thinking that it's going to level out. Yeah, I hear you, Mayor.
Yeah, it's not. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Administrative Services Fund, City Manager's Office, Mr. Brown, are you there, or are we going to Mr. Wood?
Before we dig into the detailed budgets, there's a few pages I want to spend a few moments on as we get going. So if you could all turn to page 4 of your binders with me. I'd also like to thank all of you for being here. I know being here a couple nights in a row is quite a challenge, and 3 nights in 1 week is going above and beyond. So we're going to try to make as efficient use of your time as possible. On page 4, you'll see the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. I'm pleased to announce this is the 10th year in a row that we've received this award. This requires the city to meet certain requirements. Our budget document, if we just followed the state's requirements, we would just have section 6. That's all that we would have as far as this document goes. So thin would really be in as far as the state is concerned. All the other sections are really building a document that we can present to the community to be as transparent and accountable as we possibly can, and also serves to provide us the opportunity to get this award. So the document's designed to be a policy document. So as you flip through some of the pages, you'll see there's some policies throughout it. It's also meant to be a financial plan. Specifically in our long-range planning section, you can kind of look into the future to see where we're going. It's also meant to be an operations guide. And this really sets the spending limits for us for the next year. It's also meant to be a communication device to the council and to the community of what the city is doing. So again, this document's intended to provide transparency and accountability for us as city staff. And this document isn't really just my creation. There's a lot of hands that get involved. The entire executive leadership team is involved. A lot of the finance staff gets involved. There's a lot of folks that are doing a lot of hard work. So while I may be the front man on this, I'm really just kind of in the back adjusting the volume. So bear with me on that. If you turn to page, let's see, page 13, we can kind of go into the budget process a little bit. Oregon is very stringent in their budget law. It's highly regulated. It's set out in the Oregon Revised Statute 294. If you ever need something to put you to sleep, go ahead and read that section. But it's really designed to have public involvement. That's why we open up the meeting with public testimony. And that's one of the key things that this group is supposed to be doing, is supposed to be involving the community, seeking that feedback. So what are we doing here? Oregon law really has laid out important objectives. Those are to establish standard procedures. So we're not the only city going through this kind of process. All government agencies are really going through this. It's requiring us to outline the programs and services and fiscal policies that we have to carry those out. We're providing estimates of revenues, expenditures, taxes. This document's meant, and this process is meant to inform the citizenry. It's also to provide controls to promote efficiency and economy and how we spend public funds. This is really no joke, to be honest with you. While I know there's a great idea of, let's round everything down and see if we can stretch the dollars as far as possible. If we do overspend our dollars, people like me can become civilly liable. So the district attorney's office can come and try to get the dollars back from me. Probably it could extend to the executive leadership team, also possibly to the city council. So I imagine there's some folks in Silver Falls School District right now that are probably a little nervous. If you've read their situation, I could easily look at their financial reports going back several years and think they're in trouble. And I would expect that their auditors are probably going to be sued as well. So I think there's a lot of issues there. So given that, while we do budget, we try to budget reasonably. If we do overspend, there are serious ramifications. So not only the civil liability issue, but I'll have to come back to the city council and say, oops, we overspent, and these are the processes that we're putting in place so that we don't do that again. And then I have to turn those processes over to the state. So while I appreciate the city's idea of least cost fashion, we also have to be somewhat reasonable in how we do our budgeting. So while having said that, I appreciate that we're trying to match our revenues and expenses for the first time in probably 20 years. This is going to help me sleep at night a lot. So let's see, turning the page to page 15. What's your duties and responsibilities? As the budget committee, you're here to receive the proposed budget, and you've heard the budget message from Adam. You're here to get public testimony, so we had a handful of folks show up today. Next part will be to discuss and deliberate on the budget. And then based off of those deliberations, if you got any questions, you can ask me, ask any of the city staff if we need more information. I'll do my best to scramble and get it ready for tomorrow, or if worst case scenario, Thursday night. You're here to specify the property tax amount. That's very important. While Adam said 2.08, don't drop the 3.8 at the end of that. That's very important. That's a lot of dollars that we'd be leaving on the table. And then your final task is to approve the proposed budget with any changes voted on by the committee. So what's beyond the scope of the budget committee? You can read that through the Oregon Department of Revenue. They have a lot of stuff on budget committees. So we're really not here to negotiate contracts, salaries, things like that. Really not here to establish goals beyond the priorities of the council. We're not really here to create new programs. So if your idea is to add a fire district, let's not do that tonight. If you want to do that, we can talk about that, but it'd be a separate process that we would need to go through. So that's really what we're here tonight to do. So your goal is to approve the budget. We'll go through, and as each fund is discussed, we'll make a motion to approve those. At the end, you can go back and say, oh, wait a minute, I think I've had a great idea overnight or whatnot, and I want to go back, and you as a group can decide if you want to go back and revisit that or not. But you can, then at the very end, we'll make a formal motion to approve the entire budget. So then the budget committee's process is really done. City Council, you have one more swing at this. June 3rd, when we have a public hearing, if you decide you can go ahead and make changes to the approved budget that the budget committee said, you have $5,000 or 10% of a fund's expenditures. If you go beyond that, we'll have to do a new budget hearing kind of process, which we can do, it just takes more time. So ultimately, City Council, you'll have the final say in what gets adopted. Let's move on to page 49, and you may need your reading glasses for this page. So this is a very big picture. This is all of the city funds combined. And we can kind of go through here just a very, very high level. Line 4, taxes and assessments. That's primarily property taxes, and you're seeing that go up about 6%. Property taxes are really going up about 3%. We have a few other things that are in there that are making the difference. License and fees, that's our franchise fees, and it's going up 10%-ish, and that's really driven by the electrical rate increases. So those are franchise fees from PGE and Salem Electric. That's really driving that. Intergovernmental, you're seeing a drop. That's line 6. That's because we're not receiving any new ARPA funds this year. So what we got is kind of what we got. Line 7, fines and forfeitures, we're seeing a decline in citations throughout the city, so that's why we're seeing that revenue slowly disappear. Charges for services is up 5.4%. That's based off of water rate increases, sewer rate increases, that's the primary driver. And I guess my biggest miss of the year is in miscellaneous. I guess I'm not a very good economist. I was betting on the interest rates actually dropping, and they continued to go up over the last year. So we have a very big positive pickup in interest. And that's what you're seeing in the miscellaneous line. If we drop down to line 18, you'll see that's personal services. That's all city staff. Overall, it's going up 3.3%. We have a cost of living of 4% that you'll see throughout the budget. That combined with changes in staffing, we have new people that have come on at lower rates, specifically in the police department. So that's why you're seeing that is a lower increase than what you'd probably anticipate. Materials and services, we're seeing the inflation. It's definitely hitting us. Capital outlays dropping, and that's again, we're not seeing the ARPA spending that we've had in the past. So those are the main things from a big global picture as far as what the city is doing. If you could turn to page 65.
Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a quick question before on page 49. Why do we have $1 million more in contingency than we're budgeting on 925?
The biggest piece is we have a street project that we're saving up dollars for, and that's about 750,000-ish, I believe.
From 2 million to 3 million?
Yeah, we're saving some dollars for not the 24-25, but for the 25-26 fiscal year, so we put that into contingency.
I guess I'll just mark that. Well, that's something we'll be voting on tomorrow, right? Oh, sorry. That's something we'll be voting on tomorrow, right?
When we get, I believe it's in the street fund. When we get to that fund, we'll be able to talk about it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Page 65, just want to highlight here, as far as overall staffing goes, we had 102 budgeted in fiscal year 23-24. We're going to 103. Really, the addition is we had a mid-year hire in the Parks Department during 2023-24. So we're really not adding new staff with this. It just kind of looks that way. So as Adam had indicated, we are planning on filling all of these positions. So I hope we have 103 at the end of the year. That's the goal. If you turn to page 67, this is a summary of employee benefits. I just kind of want to walk you through a few things that may apply to all of the funds as we go through them. So salary and wages, line 1, if you look at the very far right columns, there's a 5% when we look at comparison from budget to budget, and then an 8% when you look at comparison from projected to budget. That's going to be the kind of the range that you're going to see throughout the budget document of salary increases. As many of you know, we did a 1% increase, mid-year cost of living increase for the non-represented employees. That kind of gives a little bit of a skew. So when we look at from budget to budget, in some areas it'll look like, oh, you're not doing 4%, you're actually doing 5%. Well, that 1% was actually last year. This is just a catch-up as we get our budgets adjusted. So realistically, when you look at the budgets, you'll see between a 5 and an 8% increase when we look at salary and wage line items. You'll also see line 3, ARPA salaries and wages. Historically, when the city had someone retire, terminate, leave service, if they had 400 hours of vacation stored up and we had to pay them out 400 hours, we couldn't hire someone until we burned through that 400 hours. So that could be 10 weeks, 2.5 months-ish before we could actually backfill a position. We're using these ARPA funds to say, hey, some of these positions are really important. We want to get someone on so we don't have a delay, say in our police department. So we're using these funds to pay those payouts when someone is terminated, retires, leaves service. We have at least a handful of police officers that we know are retiring between now and December 31st, as well as an HR director. So that's 200,000 is what we're earmarking for that.
Mr. Hussman.
Thank you, Senor Chair. Mr. Wood, does the Family Medical Leave Act or any of the other newer state policies change the calculus here on this page as you're walking through everything?
Well, long-term it will. As people get medical benefits through the state in addition to city benefits, what we're finding is they don't necessarily have to use the city benefits. So some of those things are, the dollars are increasing from payout standpoint.
Okay. Are we aware, this may be a Ms. DePina question, are we aware of any City of Keizer employees using FMLA at this point?
I think we have people coming and going all the time, so.
Right. I can imagine, but.
Mr. Huston, yes, we absolutely have people using FMLA and OFLA and the state leave that is newly available and in many different combinations, as Kristen will painfully tell you.
It is available to all city employees, so it is encouraging to know that they are taking up those options, so thank you. Mr. Wood, thank you so much as well.
Thank you. Line 8, retirement. This is a good year for us. We're not getting hit with the PERS ugly stick. PERS sets their retirement contribution rates every other year, and this is a year that we don't have a rate change, so that's a positive for us. So the retirement is increasing basically by the increase in wages. Insurance, we're looking at about a 7% increase there, which is still fairly low in the big scheme of things as far as medical dental insurance goes. So we do aggressively negotiate with our providers to keep that rate as low as possible. And with that, we can move to page 93, and that's where we can start some of the budget deliberations. We are about halfway through our time, so I don't know, Chair, if you want to take a 5-minute break.
Let's make that so. Let's take a break. 5-minute break.
Apologies for calling you Senor Chair earlier, just want to spice it up.
Okay, we're back in order. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. On page 93, this is the overview of the Administrative Services Fund. This is where many years ago we decided to say, hey, instead of splitting the city manager's salary into 25,000 different buckets, it makes more sense to put it in one bucket so we can actually look at a total. So we've developed this Administrative Services Fund. It has about 9 or so different areas. Most of these are relatively small areas, say like city manager department, 1 person, HR, 2 people, city attorney, 2 people. So not a lot of things to talk about specifically when you're looking at financial stuff. So we can kind of go through the summary real quick. So in overall, we're looking at total requirements increasing about 2.7%. Largely that's materials and services this year. We are keeping the personal services kind of at bay a little bit, even with the 4% increase. So as we start at, say, line 19, city manager, again, as we talked about 4% to 8%, that kind of a range, that's what we're seeing as far as compensation goes. Same with city attorney, we did have some staffing changes, so the numbers look a little wonky there. Same with city recorder's office, you're seeing decreases there, again, staffing changes. Human resources, no staffing changes, although there will be into the future as we change things up there. The finance non-departmental is the biggest, and we've had some staffing rearrangements there. Plus, we've had some newer people that are eligible for step increases. So that's why you're seeing that one kind of stand out a little bit. So we do have a 10-step process where, you know, you come in based on your experience every year, you get a cost of living and then a step increase. So that can equate to, in this year, you know, 7%-ish, somewhere in that range. So that's why you're seeing that. Information systems, again, same people, just some interesting transitions as we've moved to 2 network administrators away from a technician and a network administrator. The utility billing, we've had a fair amount of change there as people have gone on to new opportunities. City center facilities, again, basically a cost of living increase, and public works, basically a cost of living increase.
Mr. Hussman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wood, do you mind talking about that IT evolution from one technical, one administrator, 2 administrators? Just what's that going to do for the city?
Sure. Basically, we have 2 really qualified people that have a lot of years of experience. So we started off with kind of a stratified, a lower level kind of position, and then a network administrator higher level. Basically, what's happened over time, especially since we're providing services to multiple other agencies as well. We service City of Staten, Almsville, Turner, and we also added League of Oregon Cities. So we're helping them from an IT standpoint. So our lower level person was doing a lot more network administration. So it was only right to move him into that role because he was doing the work anyway.
Mm-hmm. Quick follow, sorry.
Quickly.
Thank you. Just what's kind of on their plate for the coming year as best they've communicated to you guys as far as what some of the IT needs are for the city?
Oh, at the other entities? Or here, or all?
Well, just understanding that they're providing some services, some backup for a few other cities.
Sure.
But specific to the city of Keizer, what is it that they've kind of outlined as you guys talk with them through budget?
Sure. Well, specific to us, we have a lot of things going on. We're in the middle of a phone system upgrade. So I think the phones, the actual hardware, pick up the phone to your ear, I believe those were one of the only assets that we actually brought from the old building to this building. So they're at least 15 plus years old, and you know, they have little stands on the bottom. Most of the stands are broken off, so they're flopped over. So we decided it was finally time to replace all of those. So that's a big piece. Our email, I don't like talking about this, but a couple of years we kind of got hit with a cybersecurity issue. Our biggest exposure right now is email. Microsoft is not doing a very good job of supporting on-premise, where we have our own server and we have our email hosted here. They really don't do a lot of good updates in a timely manner for us anymore. So we're really worried about cybersecurity, so we're moving our email to the cloud. In addition to that, because then Microsoft will really be the one kind of tracking that for us and applying the patches, immediately, not waiting for us to have to do that. So
Okay.
that's
Council President Starr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wood, can you tell me, or I guess maybe refresh my memory, I have two, the non-departmental finance, and where how do I equate, or where do I find the FTE that make up these numbers? So I guess I have three, sorry. I can't count tonight, so that should give you a ton of confidence in being on the budget committee. City manager, obviously that's one person. City manager is two people?
one.
Right, I
Just
thought we
one.
only had
We
one.
have an assistant city manager.
Right, but the city it says right here on line 19, city manager, so that's one person, right?
Correct.
Right, okay. And then, so where do I find the number of FTE that makes up this personnel amount? What is non-departmental finance? I'm sure you've told me before, but in my head, finance is a department, so what is non-departmental? And then, for example, line 26, how many, again, I guess I'm looking for FTE for that 146,000. So just where do I
Sure.
get that?
Do we want to just, as I go through the detail for those sections, I can tell you the
Sure,
FTE?
if we're gonna do that, that's
Yeah,
great,
yeah,
thank
sure.
you.
Mayor Clark?
And microphone. For those following along, the staffing allocations are on page 66 of the budget document.
So maybe with that, let's just get into the details and let's have a little fun with this. It'll be great.
Okay. Ms. Christopher?
So where are you, Tim?
I'm going to be on page 95. Let's go to 95, city manager.
Okay. So, but right now we're going to 66?
No,
No, 95.
Oh, we're going to
Yeah, let's stay on
there was a
95.
question about.
We just have to flip back and forth.
Okay. Okay, that's,
Mi-
I just thought.
Ms. Herb?
Thank you, Chair. But for those other cities that we're serving, are they paying us?
They are. We're on a cost reimbursement basis. And we don't do a lot of work. Totals about 30 to 35,000 in any given year.
Okay. And where would we see that in here?
You can see that on page 93, line 8, intergovernmental IT agreements.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right, page 95, city manager's office. We have one employee in this, one FTE. So you can see personnel services increasing 3.9% and a little bit of travel. City manager is going to be kind of steering the ship for us for the next year and trying to achieve as many of the city council goals as possible. Any questions on the city manager budget?
Can you pull your mic just a little closer?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any questions on the city manager budget? Okay, moving on. Page 97, city attorney's office. This is two FTEs, our city attorney, and then we have a legal assistant. And again, you'll see because of the change up in staffing that we had with the city attorney, the payroll numbers look a little wonky, but it is a 4% cost of living increase. A little bit of travel and always some legal service contracts. This is for anything that we need to outsource. With the changeover, we didn't spend what we thought we were going to spend, so some of that is rolling over into the next year. And then we're not expecting to have to update the law library this year. Those are the major changes, and again, the city attorney's office is going to be trying to achieve as many of the city council goals as possible. Any questions on the city attorney's office?
I see one. Ms. Herb?
Thank you, Chair. So on that administrative services line 5, Mr. Wood, what are they charged for?
Good question. So for the administrative services, we take all these departments, smash them together, and say based off of an allocation methodology, This percentage of the city attorney goes to the water fund, the street fund, the storm fund, the general fund, based off the level of services that they provide. So if you actually look on page 98, you can see in the middle of the page, there's that chart, and that shows the breakdown of where the city attorney's dollars are going. So you can see a vast majority of it is general fund, and that makes sense given, a lot of the work that they've been doing over the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, I guess you can continue, Mr. Wood.
Okay. Moving on to the city recorder's department. This is 2 FTEs, and we did have 100% turnover in this department. So you're going to see some payroll. It's okay. Turnover's good sometimes, unless you steal my employees. That's another story. So you're going to see the payroll numbers look a little crazy. Outside of payroll, there's a little bit of travel to keep some certification, that kind of stuff. And again, on page 100, you can see how that gets broken down to the different operating funds. And with that, is there any questions on the city recorder department? That's 2 FTE.
I see no questions. Please continue.
Okay, moving on to the human resources department. This is 2 FTE. You'll see, well, total personnel services is increasing 4%, so that's roughly the cost of living. The major change here is in the contractual services line item. There was a wellness kind of charge that was going centrally here and then getting allocated out to the departments. We decided it was easier just to allocate it to the departments directly when we paid the bill. So you're seeing a drop there. Other than that, not a lot to talk about. We are going to be busy in the HR area implementing the the information system.
Mr. Hussman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pina, I would like to hear from you on the HR department budget. This is, I would expect, your last HR budgetary meeting of sorts. So if there's something you want to impart upon us, please, I want to provide this forum for you.
I very much appreciate that. There is really nothing exciting to report on the HR budget. We, as always, are doing, I think, excellent service to the city with the resources available. Thank you.
We didn't always sign up for exciting, but we'll take it as it comes. So thank you so much.
Mr. Wood. Continue.
Okay, moving on. Finance non-departmental. This has 4 FTEs in it. This is myself. We have a payroll person, accounts payable person, general ledger, general banking kind of stuff. And then we have an administrative assistant that's 70% allocated to the event center.
Ms. Cross. I can't hear you.
Sorry, summary of the finance, non-departmental. On the community center fund, will you tell me what that $86,900 is?
That is the administrative assistant. 70% of her time is allocated to the event center.
Is that the lady that works during the day?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 70% of her salary is $86,000?
Well, in addition to the cost of processing payroll, accounts payable.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Wood. Oh, wait, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these figures are salary plus all the benefits, right? It's not, so this is just above and beyond that. And so I think that's important to kind of get out there too, that this is not their take-home pay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Reed. Anything else before we move on? Okay.
Page 105, we have 2 FTE in the information system department. The big change really is software. Gosh, I'm just losing my voice here. I think it's round 2 of COVID. Oh, did I say that out loud? I was really trying to time it so that it hit me last week, so I'd be out, but not so much. So the big change is the computer software. This is charges to move the email to the cloud.
It's all right, we want you healed up good, we got more to do.
Also some Public Works GIS software. So that's the majority of the change in the IT department right now.
Mr. Hussman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wood, we'll happily do a 2-count breathing exercise with you, but also, is HRIS a part of this since we have technically approved this by council vote? Where did that software upgrade fall in line?
Those costs will be in the ARPA fund.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you, just wanted to make sure that I had the right funding source available on that. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
With respect to hardware, we'll be working on our access points, also our backups, and then our phone and email system upgrades. So those are the major changes within the IT department.
Any other questions about IT? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Brown.
Just wanted to double check, did Councilor President Starr, did you get your questions answered about the FTE?
So page 107, utility billing. We have 3 FTE here. And I did listen to the long-range planning, and I think I misstated myself. When we send out the past due notices, it's not 15,000, it's 1,500. So I think I added an extra 0 in my excitement of talking about past dues. I did delay, well, I didn't intentionally delay, but we delayed about 4 days sending out the past dues. It only changed the number about 25. And when I did the math, it cost us about $1 per past due statement. So really doesn't make sense to change our current process as we talk about delaying to see if we can get some more payments in to reduce the number of past due statements.
Only 25. No,
Yeah, 25 fewer statements, correct, yeah. Yeah, so if they're gonna miss the deadline, they're gonna miss it big. Yeah. So it was a good question that got asked, and I'm happy to do the research, and I was kind of surprised, so there you go. We have 3 FTE in this department. The biggest thing is really contractual services, as we see credit card fees continue to go up because more and more people are paying with their credit cards and getting their miles. Much beyond that, we're really trying to keep a lockdown on our postage and printing. We're seeing people go to more electronic statements, so that's why we're not seeing a big increase in the postage and printing costs.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wood, how often do we do like a pricing comparison on the credit card processing fees? Because I feel like it's a business where you could capitalize on
Good question.
price comparison or price shopping. So just a question.
Well, the majority of the Visa card charges, credit cards, it's going to be pretty comparable because we get specific utility rates for the majority of our charges. So we're not going to see a lot when we switch between processors. What we'll see a difference on is, say, the front end, so the payment portals. And that's one of the things that we're looking at now, actually, as we speak. We're looking at doing a RFP possibly. So it's been a few years. I want to say it's been probably about 5 or 6 since we've actually done that. So it's time. Good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Wood?
I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Lawyer. He can talk about the public works since he'll be probably talking most of the rest of the night. So, Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to start that. I'm going to catch it from you here if I'm not careful. This public works non-departmental budget captures all the costs associated with public works staff paid from more than one fund, like myself, and a couple others, our administrative assistant, and all of the costs associated with operating our public works shop, which is behind the fire district on Shamal Road Northeast. This was the transition to this back when the Administrative Services Fund was established because we were having a hard time tracking exact costs for that facility. There's really no surprises, no changes. Reduction in the capital outlay section is the primary change. We completed a repaving and resealing of part of our parking lot over there this year. Next year, we're doing a minor remodel of the upstairs bathroom over there. That's about it. As you'll see through the rest of my funds, increases in electricity or utilities, depending on what fund or what fund shows what line. Some of them have utilities, some have electricity separate. And that's largely the increase in PG costs. So happy to answer any questions.
I see no questions. Next, Public Works.
Civic Center facilities, that's the fund that operates this building, takes care of this building, and the staff of 1.2, I believe it is, something like that. All of 1.2 FTE operate this facility and maintain it. Again, the biggest change is capital improvements. This current year, we finished up rebuilding and replacing the trellises at the break areas at the police department and city hall. And next year, we don't have anything planned. So we're way down on those numbers, but that's just lucky that we don't have anything to replace this year. This does also include the sinking fund for this facility to put away funds to do major replacements as the building ages.
Council President Starr.
Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Wood, Mr. Brown, I'm not sure who to direct this to, but I thought we've talked in the past and budgeted for improvements here. So things like, maybe fixing the sound system, or I thought we were getting new chairs, or, I just different things like that. Where are those improvements? Is that in ARPA or would that be in here? Sorry, my mic's not on. I'll repeat that. Aren't you lucky? Not sure where to direct this, but we've talked, I know in years past, about improvement projects for this building. The microphone that doesn't fall off the podium. New chairs. I mean, I sat in a meeting the other day and the edge of the table ruined a sweater because it's jagged. And I know that's a first world problem, but when I think about people that are coming in as visitors into our community center, where are those projects to keep up our equipment and our materials that we're charging people to use?
Good question. So for the audio stuff in this room, you'll see that in the PEG fund. And actually, we're having some consultants come in as we speak. We've reached out to anyone that we know of in this area. I think we have about 5 or 6 to say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything wrong? What do we need to fix? We've gotten some initial responses back. Still kind of waiting to get some red flags of what we need to fix. So that's currently in process. With respect to the event center, we did have in the budget, in the event center budget, a plan to replace all of the chairs there and a few of the tables. That kind of got sidelined once the storage space concept went away. So we're looking, we didn't want to buy stuff and have to move it around if we knew an event storage space was coming. So we were waiting for that, but then that didn't pan out. So we switched gears and we're looking at getting some projectors that'll come down from the ceilings. So that's next on the list. But we do have chairs, tables in the budget for next year for the event center.
Okay, so this civic center then for when people is just not the event center part of it?
That's correct.
This
That's
is for
correct.
like city administrative offices, that type of?
That
and
would
does
be
the-
correct.
Does anything needed in the police department fall under that, or is that under the civic center facilities?
Police department would fall under this if there's something that they needed.
In here, would be in the
Correct.
civic center?
Correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under line 3, Mr. Wood, it says restricted for civic center improvements, $585,000, 800. What is that placeholder for?
Oh, sure. That's our sinking fund for this entire building. So someday, we're only at 15 years, but someday we're going to need a new roof, HVAC, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So we're growing that.
So that you just don't want to touch?
Correct.
So really, where is your line item of what you can touch for items to improve this next year?
Well, that would be line 33, and we haven't identified anything that we need to do
So
immediately.
it's just zero?
Correct.
Should we put something there? Is that when we do our deliberations?
Well, if you have projects in mind,
I don't know. I'm pretty sure there might be a kickboard you might need that might cost $5. I mean, there should be something, I would think, but I guess we can talk about it tomorrow. Thank you.
If I may,
Mr.
those kind of costs are incorporated into the maintenance budget for this facility. So that would be in lines 28, 27 and 28 of this Civic Center facilities budget. The routine maintenance items, that's what I would consider routine maintenance items around the building, separate from the event center, because all those repairs are covered through that fund. But for the police department, city hall, council chambers, those kind of repairs are covered within the funds allocated in this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. Mr. Brown.
Just, all the bases for these microphones were just swapped out within the last couple months.
Okay. Ms. Christopher.
So what's line 38 for? In contingencies?
That's the sinking fund.
yeah, that's a sinking fund, so that would be for the roofs, the HVACs, if we had a catastrophic something.
What's the sinking fund at the top? You said 3 was. I'm sorry? What, like in 3, you said that was the sinking fund?
That's correct. That's going into fiscal year 24-25. At the end of 24-25, that'll be 650.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Wood.
Moving on to page 113, general administration. This is kind of the catch-all for a lot of things that have impacts on everything throughout the city, but not necessarily related to a specific department. In here, we have, well, we record the interest revenue for this fund in here, and again, have a big pickup during the year, and it's going to tail off a little bit as we use up some of our cash reserves, doing some of the ARPA projects. We have office supplies, printing, postage, association memberships. This is where we have our League of Oregon Cities dues, those kind of things. We do have a tuition reimbursement program that we moved to this fund last year that we do have some people utilizing. We also provide for the city council expenses to send everyone to the League of Oregon Cities conference and then the mayor to the mayor's conference. The big thing is the liability insurance. You'll see that just the premium piece goes up about 5.3%, so that's fairly reasonable. The big kicker is line 30. We have a retro plan where if we don't have any claims, we do really great. Our premium's really low. If we do have claims, they come back and bill us for those claims up to a certain threshold. This reserve, this contingency provides the maximum that of our exposure during the year. So, if we don't have any claims, we could save $137,000. If we have some bad claims, we would move dollars from the contingency to the insurance line item to cover those claims. With that, is there any questions? One thing I think that got brought up was how often do we go out and look for insurance companies? We do have a broker that we use every year. When I went out and did some research, I found that 98% of the cities use CIS for their liability insurance in Oregon. I couldn't figure out who the other 2% were, but I'm willing to bet that they're really, really small cities. So they kind of have a monopoly on us.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to get around that. I don't know of other providers, and apparently none of the other cities know of other providers. So I think there's an opportunity for someone to go and do a city insurance, I think. So I don't have a good answer for you of what other potential insurance companies we could go with for a liability kind of stuff.
Ms. Christopher.
What kind of insurance claims are these? Are these like
Gosh.
slips and falls or?
Yeah, slips and falls.
Okay.
One of our trucks ran into something.
Okay.
Caused property damage. Yeah, those kind of things.
Okay.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wood, could you elaborate on the association memberships, please?
Sure.
Like, detail that out.
So my estimate, League of Oregon Cities, is going to be paying about $33,600. This is on page 115 under footnote 18.
Thank you.
So we can all play along.
There we go. Thank you.
The Mid-Willamette Valley COG, $25,000. SEDCOR, $4,800. Oregon Procurement Network, $2K. Government Ethics Division, $1,500. And then we have a few local newspaper kind of things, Oregonian, Statesman, not the Oregon. What do we have? Just Statesman Journal and Keizer Times. So that's the majority of what goes into there.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions on general fund, general administration? Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the Administrative Services Fund as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Wood, what's next?
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and turn the street fund over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. Street fund revenues are derived from gas taxes, and that's apportioned by the state based on population of cities across the state. We don't see a major change in revenues in this fund on a year-to-year basis. A few years ago, when the gas tax was increased, we saw an increase in revenue, but since then it's been pretty flat from year to year. Primary focus on the street fund of the past has been to maintain our existing road system. Try to encourage the use of money to repave streets and repair streets to keep them passable. The other thing in this fund is project costs. We have, as was mentioned earlier by Mr. Wood, you'll see in the contingency line item in this year, an amount of $805,000. That's very unusual for a contingency for this fund of something not large. That's primarily $750,000 set aside for match funds for the Verdal Lane project, urban improvements from Dearborn to the Salem Parkway. That project was allocated and received federal funding through the SCATS program. The initial estimate was low. I'm going to say extremely low. When ODOT got going on design and updated the estimate, it was almost twice as much as the original estimate. We could not, in good conscience, ask for federal money to cover all of that extra cost. And so I have committed the city to about $1.5 million of additional funding, as long as I could get it over 2 fiscal cycles. Working with the ODOT staff, they were able to adjust their budget or their bid date for the project by literally a few weeks, from July to September, and that allowed the city of Keizer to have 2 fiscal cycles to save up $1.5 million. The first half of that is in this year. The result of that is to reduce our resurfacing line item about the same amount. Still allows us to resurface some streets, keep them maintained, keep them in good condition, keep them from failing in the future, and accomplish the need to finish the Verdal Lane project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the street fund.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, which is our next one? Street lighting district. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Page 119, Street Lighting District. As many of you are aware, this operates on a reimbursement basis. So the city has over 200 different districts throughout the city. We front the electricity costs, and then we turn around and bill the residents after the fact on their property tax statements. The big change that we're seeing here is electricity costs. So unfortunately, we're going to see assessments go up probably about 7% next year. That's really going to, I mean, it sounds like a big number, but it's really about $5 or $6 per household on a typical assessment. So the assessments are relatively small, primarily because Salem Electric and PGE have done a really good job of putting in efficient lighting in the street lights area. Sometimes it bothers me as I walk at night. You can't see quite as well, but just know that we're saving a few dollars here and there. I think it's worth it for our residents. So with that, if there's any questions on the street lighting district.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the Street Lighting District Fund.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Transportation improvements.
Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim, Mr. Chair, Budget Committee. This fund revenue, this fund's revenues are derived from systems development charges paid by new development within the city, both single-family, multifamily, and commercial. The funds are set aside to build identified projects within our transportation systems plan. The number one project is the widening of the southbound on-ramp onto I-5. We have an agreement with ODOT that we will fund a portion of that project when they come calling. We've been waiting 14 years,
Yeah.
something like that now. They haven't called yet, but they will someday. And when they do, we'll have the money to put in and meet our obligation.
Great. Any questions? Okay, I have two. Mayor Clark.
On the eastbound to southbound on I-5 with ODOT, we've even gone and asked. So this isn't something that's just been sitting there and nobody's been paying attention. Mr. Lawyer and I have both reached out to ODOT going, so what do you think? And that's pretty much where it landed. They have other priorities, and this doesn't even reach the top 20, as what I've been able to ascertain from our regional ODOT leadership. So there it sits.
And in addition to that, when I've asked, I've kind of got a bewildered look from ODOT staff in terms of, we're not really quite sure how we can even build it. With the parkway taking off, the railroad past Trestle, the weaving of traffic coming out of Keizer Station, it's a very, very challenging design.
So, Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lawyer, you mentioned multifamily housing, the system development charges, but I look at the budget note there and it says the system development fee projections assumes 25 new single-family homes developed during the year. Where's your projection for the multifamily housing and how does that impact the revenue?
We don't typically project for multifamily projects unless we know for sure they're in the works. We don't have anything that we know for sure is in the works for next fiscal year, and so therefore we didn't project those costs. If you look at the projections for the current fiscal year, we projected $24,000.
And you got in 147. That's what made me ask.
Yeah, we've talked about that over the years. Shane and I have talked about it. Mr. Brown and I talked about it when he was here. And unless we know, literally, we have a building permit in for a multifamily project, we don't project those costs because we just never know when they're going to happen. And they could happen, we could adopt the budget and they could happen tomorrow, literally, or they could not happen at all. And it really doesn't matter in terms of availability of funds because we're not planning to need the funds in any given fiscal cycle anyway, if that makes sense, because of this ODOT thing.
Kind of a follow-up.
Follow-up?
So if we look at what caused me to ask this question, the budgeted 24,900 and we're projected to bring in 147,000. When do you get the money? Like when they apply for the permit or so?
When the permit is issued, we collect the SDCs.
Okay.
And so Again, you know, plan review takes right now for a commercial or multifamily project probably takes 4 to 6 weeks. So if they applied today, we wouldn't even get that revenue until next fiscal year, okay? So if we knew that was in, we probably would project that in next year, but right now there's nothing in the hopper.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, any other questions about Transportation Improvement Fund? Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the Transportation Improvement Fund.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It seems to be unanimous. Stormwater pages. Stormwater, is that you again, Mr. Lawyer?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stormwater fund, those revenues are derived from user fees that are collected through the city services bill for the third or fourth year in a row. We're not proposing a rate increase. That the rate is adequate to fund the needs of that utility. These are dedicated funds by city ordinance. Funds 9 FTEs and maintenance of the stormwater system throughout the city, and capital improvement projects that could be in a given year, a storm drain replacement, a storm drain repair, a storm drain realignment, or for next fiscal year, a wetlands enhancement project on the east side of Claggett Creek from the creek to the base of the hill where the new apartments are. That project is in design, in the permitting process right now. I had hoped to have it under construction this summer. Unfortunately, we ran into a little bit of a hiccup in the permitting process through the state and the federal government. We were required to do a cultural and historic survey of the property. Set the project back to about 3 months at about $40,000. But it's a requirement, we couldn't not do it. So that is just about done. We'll get that information turned into the state so they can complete our permit review. I can't remember the term they put on the permit, but it's very, very unfriendly. Something like non-determined application fail. I don't remember the words, but it's very, very unfriendly. It's just their language that says we're waiting for more information. Okay, so that should be turned in. We'll get the permits probably in the next couple months and get this project in the mix for construction next summer. We have to do this during the in-water work period, which is typically June through October. And we knew when we had this additional requirement study to be done, there was no way we'd have the permit in time to start work this summer. So with that, I'd
Mr.
be happy
Lawyer,
to
did
answer
we get all
questions.
of our permits that we needed for the environmental and all the rest of that? Do we have any of those coming up that we need to do?
Not other than the permits we've applied for that project are the only ones we need other than our own internal permit, and that's easy for us to handle.
So all the EPA stuff and all that were handled for the next few years?
Yes, for our operational permits, yes.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. The DEQ is going through the update of the Phase 2 NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit process. They're working on that application and any new requirements for it. The last time we went through a permit renewal process, it took 7 years to get an actual permit. I don't think it'll take that long this time. I'm thinking probably another year, and they'll have the new permit to us. In the meantime, we'll continue to operate under the regulations that we have in place now and meet those requirements.
Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we're not looking at increases to the stormwater fund because the system, as I understand it, is in a state of good repair, is that correct?
It is overall, yes. There are some needs in the future, but overall, the system is in good repair, yes.
And a follow-up, if I may. For the stormwater system, adding additional pipes and drains and so forth generally is not what we do. Isn't most of it now vegetated stormwater facility?
No, in terms of new development, it's vegetative stormwater facility and or infiltration. We don't extend pipes to creeks anymore because for one, we have them all needed ones in place. And new development, there's just not a need for that. We have identified a significant project that's going to be needed here in the next few years. There's an existing system in the Willow Lake subdivision, Willow Lake Road from Windsor Island Road to the west. Bobby, Todd, Lacey, Winterleaf, Summerleaf, a bunch of those courts back in there. That pipe runs in the backyards of all those homes. It was something that was built early on in our tenure as a city, and it was allowed kind of common by the county in those days. We would never allow it today. Well, it's failing, and it's failing in a fairly significant fashion. We're gonna have to address that. It's not impossible, but it's very, very expensive to repair it in place, so we're gonna have to reroute it out into Willow Lake Road. I targeted that to be a phase 3 or 4 phase project, but that's a couple years out yet. But other than that, I don't see any major significant projects outside of that necessary.
And one final.
Okay.
With that Willow Lake Road project, what is being set aside now in terms of capital outlay is being anticipated?
We haven't set anything aside yet. We're still evaluating the actual needs. We've come up with a very, very preliminary design showing that it can be realigned and work. We still need to do some more studies and kind of refine the costs. And I would expect you'll see something for that next year at this committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other stormwater questions? Mr. Husband?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lawyer, appreciate you breaking this all down for us. Do you mind just giving additional details as to the scope of the Claggett Creek Wetland Enhancement Projects?
Certainly.
You've given us a sense of terrain, what it's going to cover. Are there any other parameters you've defined on that at this point?
Well, I'll kind of give you a project overview. I don't know if you've noticed on Shamawa and Dearborn, new concrete being poured down the slope. That's the initial part of that walkway, okay? That's been done by the developers of the apartment complex who are in agreement and arrangement with the city and purchasing some property. That will continue down to the bottom by the city when we start our project and turn into a boardwalk, which will be a composite lumber material that will be about 10 feet wide and traverse the property all the way between Shamawa and Dearborn. Along the creek itself, there's a man-made berm that's been there for I don't know how many decades, but truly made by the former property owner. Our project is going to take that down, spread it back out, allow the water to flood that ground more regularly. We're going to replant that property, encourage natives, not invasives, and just enhance it to try and get the wildlife to use it more. It'll be a passive recreation area for the public to be able to walk through, visit, see. And there will be times when that walkway might be underwater, that boardwalk might be underwater. And that's okay, that's by design.
But quick follow, safe to say that, yeah, as we develop Claggett Creek to the extent that exists in our master plan, as I recall from a previous conversation we had, there is at least a master plan of where a boardwalk could go, but there is a general expectation that, yeah, pathway is going to flood, but in some ways we just have to give it a reasonable course and give reasonable direction as far as where the wetland needs enhancing, what kind of improvements we're going to make biologically there.
Yes.
Okay.
Overall.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other stormwater fund questions? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the stormwater fund.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Sewer, I assume this is you again, Mr. Lawyer. Oh, never mind. Mr. Wood.
Sewer is an odd beast. As many of you know, we're part of a multi-jurisdictional group, conglomerate. Salem actually manages the sewer system for us, but we do the billing. So this is a pass-through fund. We bill the citizens, residents of Keizer, and then we pass those dollars along to the city of Salem. We do keep a little percentage to offset our costs as well. Unfortunately, we don't have the final numbers from Salem. They're just now spinning up their wastewater task force. That's where they go through the process of looking at their cost of service model and then determining the rates based off of those costs. That'll happen this summer, and probably by October, November, we'll know the final rates. During our last go-around 2 years ago, they're just hitting that period of high inflation in a lot of their costs. They do a lot of steel, concrete, those kind of things. So their dollars were increasing pretty quickly. So the last go around, we saw 6-7% increases. They said they were going to hopefully get back to their more normal of 4 to 5% increases. So I'm kind of banking on that for now until we get better information. So this budget includes a 5% rate increase. That'll get confirmed by Salem when we go through that task force process. With that, if there's any questions on the sewer
Clark.
fund?
Historically, we've had a representative on that task force. Have you received notification for us to get someone appointed to that?
No, I haven't received any notification yet, although it is still early. I've been that representative for the last probably 6 years.
Oh. It's in good hands, as I was.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the sewer fund as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Sewer reserve.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Tim. Sewer Reserve Fund, those funds are derived from a systems development charge that's assessed to properties that develop outside of the original sewer, Keizer Sewer District, primarily northern Keizer. Windsor Island Road is probably one of the only areas left that has much property available that's outside the original district. Those funds are set aside to build trunk sewer lines. We've built pretty much everything that's required or shown in the sewer master plan, except for a line on Windsor Island Road. And so, the recent storage building project, they constructed a portion of that trunk line. And in lieu of them constructing the line, we waived the acreage fee for them. It was actually a win for the city. We would have probably had to contribute some funds to pay for that project, but the developer was willing to build it at his cost, and we waived the acreage fee. So that's the only line left in the city left to build. And again, I put in here 2 acres of development for next year. That's kind of an educated guess. It may be less than that, it may be more than that, it just kind of depends. Based on what I've seen since we put this together, development potentials coming in, or developers looking at property up there, I should say, in that part of the city. It may be more than 2 acres, but we'll see when they come in, so.
Okay, do we have any questions on this fund? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the sewer reserve fund as presented.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Water.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Water fund revenues are wholly derived from user fees, water rates. As was mentioned earlier, proposed 4% rate increase in the water fund this year. That's consistent with the water rate structure that we've been following for the last 20 years. We've actually had a few years in that 20 where we did not have a rate increase. 2008, the recession hit, we didn't do one. I think we didn't do one in COVID times. But even with those not taking place, we've been still able to operate fine with a 4% increase. This fund has about 12 FTEs within it. Really no changes or surprises from between this year and next year. The biggest capital outlay item is to replace a 2004 service truck that has had its challenges of late and needs to be updated. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on the water fund? Mayor Christopher.
So, the 4% increase, how much does that 4% raise in 1 year period? The difference from where, what's?
Mr. Wood.
That breaks down to about $75,000.
The 4% is representative of
Correct.
75,000. So, and that's if we increase it by 4% for Keizer residents?
That is correct.
So if I understand what our city manager wants to do, you want to move ARPA money into the general fund, and 1.1 million is unallocated, correct?
1.5 you've got allocated to police storage and PERS. The other 1.1 is for what purpose?
That's to get us through the 2029 period. So as we slowly draw down that ending fund balance, that will keep us even, Steven, as we.
So it's unallocated. It's in waiting. And if everything is as we've budgeted, we budget high, we spend low. But if everything is as we've budgeted, then we're not gonna spend that this year. It's gonna wait for, correct?
That is correct.
So could we use some of that ARPA money to pay that $75,000 and not impose an increase to Keizer residents this year, not unlike what we did in 2008 and 2020? Was it 2020?
20.
Yeah, where, I mean, throughout this entire budget document, all we have heard and talked about is the inflationary times that we're in, which are unprecedented. And certainly our Keizer residents are paying the same amounts. And I just don't think this is a time to be imposing higher taxes on them when we have the money. We have the ARPA money available to do that.
That's definitely an option. A couple things to consider. If we do that, the timeline will just move closer. So instead of 2029, we're going to run out of ending fund balance. It could be 2028-ish.
It could be.
Could be.
Or it could not be.
Or could not be.
Correct.
The other thing is if we do skip a year, I mean, the more years that we skip with a rate increase, the more likelihood that we're going to have to do an 8% increase or a 9% increase in a given year to try to catch up.
It could be. Or, I mean, we're still going to have that money. That $75,000 is still going to come in. Water's still going to get it because it's going to come from ARPA instead of taxpayers. So
Correct.
there wouldn't be anything to make up because they're still going to be receiving the money that they need to run the water fund.
So I agree with what you're saying. The challenge would be when we don't move the ARPA money in, all of a sudden the fund is going to be 75 to 150,000 short. So that's when we'll see an 8 or 9% increase to try to catch us
If we
up.
didn't move ARPA money in.
Oh, if you do.
I don't
If you
understand
do,
that.
but, and then if you do it for 1 year, we need a continual source of funds. So, I mean, just like I say, it's just a consideration.
But it's not going to be 8%. If we take care of that 4% with ARPA money this year, then next year, we don't know what next year's going to bring. But if things improve and we don't have 18% PGE increases, then potentially folks are going to be in a better position to be able to absorb those increases in cost.
Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
To go along with what Mr. Wood was stating, if we, I'll say, backfilled the water fund with $75,000 for 1 year with ARPA funds, the next year, the need of that $75,000 and more is going to be there.
Right.
And so the rates are going to have to go up 8% to make up that difference. And it's more than electricity. We are seeing costs increasing across the board, materials, brass, copper, rock, concrete, everything that we buy and need to operate the water system that we use on a daily basis is increasing and increasing and increasing.
Right.
And to accommodate those cost increases, you'll notice a drop in the transfer from the water fund to the water facility fund. That's project money. So what we're doing is we're replacing less water mains each year to keep the rates down. If we don't have regular rate increases, we are going to not be able to replace water mains. And it won't take very many years for that to come to a stop because those funds are going to be needed for operation. That is a choice. That is an option for the budget committee. But I just want the committee to understand the ramifications in the future of making those choices.
Matthew?
Thank you. So I'm also under the impression that digging into the ARPA fund may not be a good idea on one main condition. While you're trying to project out to 2029, do you at this time believe that you have a positive grasp on the negative externalities that pushing off that cost to the citizens may cause? Or are we projecting some form of stability and we think this is something we can do in the interim?
Mr. Brown.
Oh, let me make an attempt to answer that. I listened to an economist last week, brought in by Segcor from the University of Oregon, who was talking about inflation. And the bottom line was that if folks are waiting for prices to come back down, that in his estimation was not going to happen. Prices are going to stay at the level they're going to stay at right now. In other words, they've come to a new average, not a temporary inflation that's going to come back down. So it's, I guess, that lens that we look at it through in trying to stabilize this budget for 5 years. It's imperfect. We could be good a year, we might be less than other, but so that's what we would like the budget committee to consider in making that decision. Can you do it? Yes. It's not our recommendation. They do it. And we do understand the burden on the families. Most of us are in this community too.
Additional questions?
Follow up.
But where you stand right now is that you don't believe that we're entering into trading the cow for the milk situation, being as it is that, they're our bread and butter and we just don't, how should I phrase this? Is the runway clear in your mind? Does it look like we could swing that earnestly?
Sure, this year you could do it. You won't know if it was the right decision for 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whoa, that was really loud. I just want to echo that I agree with Ms. Christopher. I think that there is a lot going on right now. I think in any business, we're seeing cost and rises in prices and costs in groceries or anything else we do. And we don't just get to go knock on our neighbor's door and ask for 4% increases. So I think that if we have the opportunity to use these ARPA funds, I would be in support of that.
Mayor Clark.
Couple of questions. The average cost for a ratepayer, this is 75,000 citywide, so we're talking what, $1 or $2 per month per household? Is that about it?
That's correct.
Follow up?
Follow up.
The cost of keeping our system in a state of good repair has kept us from very, very expensive replacements and leakages in systems that we're seeing in other cities that have not done so. Mr. Lawyer, when we're looking at making sure that we maintain, or as we were talking, sustain our system at a cost of $1 or $2 per month per household, what could that save the taxpayers in the future if we fall behind that master plan?
It's tough to answer at a solid number, but as we know, costs increase on an annual basis, so any water main we can't replace this year is going to cost us more next year. There's tens of thousands of feet of main to replace yet. If you don't replace them, they leak. When they leak, we have to repair them. That's time and expense from the staff and materials to make the repairs on a pipe that's going to have to be replaced anyway. So it's really hard for me to say number-wise. I just know that ultimately, if we delay replacements or delay improvements to the water system, it's going to cost the community more in the future.
Thank you.
Bottom line. What that number is, I can't tell you, but it's going to be more. And one of the things that I recalled, the last time we did not do a rate increase, one of the main reasons we didn't is because we paid off debt that year, and we had the funding that we had set aside for paying the debt available for operations. So we were able to delay a rate increase by 1 year because those funds were available.
Councilor Cross.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, Jesus. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to remember to turn this on. Wow. Maybe we'll get that new audio, Sheeny. So I just want to reiterate, I understand that that's $1 or $2 a household, but $1 or $2 when we have 50 to 60 households lining up at our food banks is a lot of money. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Mayor Clark.
One more follow-up. When households have difficulties with their utility bills, we have a process in place to assist with that. Do we not, Mr. Wood?
We do, yes.
And that is utilized by the families in our community that are facing difficulties with their utilities.
That is correct. We have multiple sources of people who provide assistance.
Thank you.
Ms. Christopher.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I'm not going to be supporting a 4% increase this year. And I understand what Mr. Lawyer's saying, and I understand what Mr. Wood and Mr. Brown are saying. You know, I think we all have to remember that what a budget is. And a budget is our best guess. None of us know, and that's what you hear Mr. Lawyer say, Mr. Wood say, Mr. Brown say. I don't know, but I know Keizer residents are hurting now, and I'm not going to support a 4% increase this year when we've got available funds to cover it.
Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it seems to me, as we've discussed over the years, our usage of ARPA funds, we have been pretty careful in policy to not make it fund maintenance or ongoing costs. We've been pretty careful to fund projects that are concrete and that we're not committing to. And so if we don't do this 4% increase, all economic projections and ARPA funds, usage of ARPA funds and other organizations, you only push this problem down the road if you use these finite funds for maintenance problems. And so right now we need to maintain our infrastructure based on things that we can control. And so the ARPA funds should be used for more concrete, more finite expenses that we can control.
Any other questions? Oh, be right back, right over here. Melissa.
Okay, so here's my question. If we're only asking to delay an increase of 4% by a year, are we expecting next year we'd have to increase by another 4%? Or?
That is correct. That's our cost of service model. We've been operating on an even rate slope, so we've consistently said through the last 10, 15 years that every year it's going to be about 4%, and that's the model that our cost of service is based off of.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wood. Herb.
Thank you, Chair. So I hear what Ms. Reed is saying about the ARPA funds only being used for sort of one-time charges, but I would say that's not really true because we spent over $2 million on the turf fields, which will now have ongoing costs. So I don't know if that's really an argument not to use the $75,000 to help our citizens this year who need help after this 18% electricity cost increase, 30% groceries. I don't know all those figures off the top of my head, but it is all adding up for people. So if we cannot do 4% and use our ARPA funds, I think I'm leaning that direction too. Thank you.
I don't know if this is on.
Yes.
If we're going to cover the 4% this year with the ARPA funds, then we don't have to cover that same 4% next year. Yes. We could just add the 4% because somebody else is paying the 4% this year. Why would we charge our residents 8% next year when all we would need is the additional 4% that someone else paid this year? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to double it because we've covered the 4%.
It's not that it wasn't collected.
We're just paying it out of ARPA funds, and then next year, when you want to do your 4%, that'll be the 4% that, so why would you double it? I don't understand.
Oh, sure. Good question. So the base amount that we'd be using to build that 4% off of would be lower. So say for this year, let's see, let's use a, so just a round number, 3.5 million, if that was the amount that we're billing, and we're saying, okay, we need to apply a 4% to that. So we would go back and do the math, and, okay, so that's $75,000 that we would add. We would add it. Then when we go back, the next year, we would need that 3.5 plus the 75,000, plus another 75,000 on top of that.
No, the
And we would be
75,000 is
missing,
there.
but our base would be still 3.5, so we're still short. So, because that 75,000 goes away and we're back at the 3.5 million. So our base for calculating the increase is 3.5 million for 2 years. So that's, and you know, we can do this. It's, I mean, if that's the direction the committee wants to go, that's not an issue. We just need to recognize that subsequent years, you're gonna have an additional 4.5 or 4% plus, you know, the compound effect of probably not having, you know, some of that. So, but, you know, again, that's the choice.
In
the
some
committee
ways,
can
it's
make.
like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Sure,
Mr. Hussman?
sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that we approve the water fund as detailed in the budget document.
We're still in discussion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no.
No.
How many noes? Who are the noes? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Noes pass. That motion dies in, it just dies. Okay? Motion failed. Counselor Cross, you had a question?
Well, I just want to make a remark that I heard that the ARPA funds are supposed to be something that we can touch and fill. But not really if the theory of just throwing it in the general fund this year. So kind of we are, kind of we aren't. So the narrative is kind of changing.
Okay, Matthew?
Thank you. I'm going to try to extend myself mentally here. So we do know that federally, soft landing, we're getting that, we're returning, but we still are in that recessionary gap. We're all still feeling it. We felt inflation. But what I'm concerned with is that while we're still here in this recessionary gap, and before we move back to that 2% that we want, we're going to be feeling this nationally. So right here, right now, while we might have long-term costs, I'm just very concerned with the matter of fact that we should not be so concerned long-term when short-term should be so uncertain, perhaps. Or to put it more plainly, instead of economically, maybe as we said in aviation, it does not matter the weather, the flight, how long is your runway? Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Tim, if we, I mean, I hear the folks concerned about the increase, and I join them. The issue, but we also have these ARPA funds sitting out there. If we did the 4% increase this year, and then we credited $75,000 in a one-time credit back to water bill folks, that would soften the 4% this year. But your base would still go up. But we'd be returning some of that ARPA money to Keizer residents. So you wouldn't have to do an 8% increase. Yes, I understand the credit would go away next year. Didn't have to. I mean, we could keep it if conditions existed, but we could still keep with the master plan, but we could use those ARPA funds as a one-time credit, one year credit on those water bills, and get to the same spot that Mayor Christopher's trying to get to, without having to, and still get the 4%. We'd end up in the same spot, I guess is what I would say.
Mayor Clark?
I yield to Mr. Wood, who wanted to respond.
I'm just scratching my head of how we would actually implement a credit onto the statement, so. Oh, yeah, no, I understand, I'm just mechanically, my mind just kind of jumped there, so I'm just thinking mechanically with our current existing system, how that would play out. So, I mean, that's an option.
I have another question.
Mayor Clark.
Yield to Ms. London.
Am I on? Yeah. Okay, so my question here is, if you don't increase it 4% this year because you use the ARPA funds, then you shouldn't be 8% off the next year because you're only off 4%.
No, the 75 doesn't continue.
No. You're only off 4% of the 4% you didn't put on the base. Okay? So it doesn't make sense to bring it up 8% the next year.
Covered it out of ARPA.
Okay? Because if, let's just say your base is $50 and you do your 4%, that's $2. And you don't put that on there, the next year when you want to do, the only difference is on that other 4%. You won't really need to add the whole 8%.
Because you've covered it out of ARPA on that.
Or my math is all wrong, which is a possibility.
I could bring something back tomorrow night of what it might look like if we were to skip a year.
Let's do
We're
that.
not going to just skip.
Let's do that. Let's get a picture.
Okay.
Let's move on to.
Mr. Duran.
So we're not skipping, we're asking to pay out of ARPA funds for the increase. So it's not being skipped. It's just going to increase 4% next year if that was the case, because we're covering it for this year. So there's no reason to double it next year because we've covered it for this year.
Mr. Lawyer.
I just want to clarify what I'm hearing here and see if what I'm understanding is accurate. So all of you help me. You do a 4% increase, you issue a credit to the residents this year of that 4%. That 4% adds to the base of the water rates. So
Correct.
it's in place.
Correct?
The following year, you add another 4% rate increase.
Correct.
Okay?
But there's no credit.
There's no credit. So the residents are going to realize an 8% increase in their pocketbooks the following year. Right?
Anyway.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that I was following that correctly. That's what I was hearing, that's what I was saying, so I want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand.
So I have another question. Sorry. So if we did, the 4% is the rate model that we have for how many more years in the future? Indefinitely?
Gosh, the master plan, does that go out another 10 years?
Yes, the master plan was updated about 10 years ago. It should be updated. It really should be updated now.
Yeah.
We have elected not to spend the money to update the master plan because the main capital improvements in the current master plan are water line replacements. That's not going to change with an update. I feel it's not good use of public money to spend money to update a study that we already know what the answer is going to be. I would propose we delay updating the water master plan for a few more years to give us a chance to, one, understand a potential urban growth boundary expansion. The other thing that's coming out is understand what we are going to be required to do to deal with PFAS, because we don't know yet, okay? That's a major, major potential cost impact to every water system in the country. Those rules have just been finalized. There's still, implementation is not finalized yet, so there's some variables in here, okay? That need to be, I need to, of course, consider moving forward. That would be the time to update the master plan once we have that piece of information and know what the direction needs to be, because I don't even know yet what kind of potential treatment might be needed for our wells to deal with those.
Okay, let's move on and address this tomorrow night.
Okay.
Okay, water facility replacement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Water Facility Replacement Fund, those revenues come from both systems development charges assessed to new connections to the water system based on water meter size. Doesn't care what type of development, residential, multifamily, commercial, it's all based on water meter size. But if you look at look closely at this fund, you'll see the major portion of that revenue is rates and transfer from the water fund into the facility fund. The facility fund is where we build things out of. New wells, water main replacement, those kinds of projects. Really the only difference this year or next year from this year is a reduction, as I mentioned earlier, in the transfer. And that's just to help balance the water fund so it can operate without having to drive another increase. $400,000 is adequate to do water main replacements next year. And then we have $400,000 in supply and treatment to deal with the very initial portion of PFAS treatment and testing necessary for that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, yeah, Sir Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you, again, tell me what PFAS means?
That was my question.
I'm sorry, but I cannot actually answer that accurately, okay? It's a compound that is found, it's a forever plastics compound, okay? I think we've heard microplastics, forever plastics, those things, that's what it is. And it is in water everywhere. I had a period when this started being discussed in the industry over the last 5 or 6 years. I wasn't too concerned for Keizer because we have a very good contained groundwater system. I was maybe had my head in the sand a bit. Oh, it's not going to be in groundwater. Oh, yes, it is. It's everywhere. We haven't tested for yet. I don't know what the levels are, but the requirements set by the EPA are set at the minimum detectable levels. And if they're detected at the minimum detectable levels, you have to take action.
Well,
it's a big deal. I'm sorry I can't answer the question. I should have wrote it down, but it's a word about this long, and I'm not exaggerating too much. It's a plastic and rubber compound chemical, or combination of chemicals.
Okay, that helps me to understand that, but I don't know where that fits here as far as the budgeting. And
It would fit into the supply and treatment line item.
Oh,
line number 18.
So we would have to spend money to address that issue,
Yes.
is what you're saying?
Any facilities that we would have to install to deal with that would be shown on that line item.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Reed.
I have the word here. It is perfluorooctane sulfonic acid.
Thank you.
I'm
sure you pronounce that better than I could.
That I'm not promising.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we
Mr.
approve
Chair,
the
if I
water
may?
facility replacement. Oh, sorry.
If I may, I recommend you do not approve this fund without approving the water fund first, because a bulk of the revenues for this fund come from the water fund. There may need to be an adjustment to this depending on the results of the water fund. That's my
fair enough.
recommendation. Because this is showing a 400,000 or 500, what am I getting my numbers right? A $500 transfer from the water fund, okay? $500,000 transfer from the water fund to the water facility fund, shown on line 12. That may have to be reduced depending on the revenue availability in the water fund, depending on what the budget committee chooses to do. They're kind of tied together.
Okay.
My point is, I don't want to lock you into having to raise the water rates to achieve the $500,000 for this fund. You understand where I'm going? Am I making sense?
Okay, let's move on to the Park Services fee, Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Park Services Fund. This fund is funds generated from both the general fund that's set at 2.5% of general fund expenditures, correct, Tim?
Revenues.
Revenues. I never get that right. 2.5% of general fund revenues and the park's fees. This fund has 5 FTE in it, and as Tim mentioned earlier tonight, we added a fifth employee in January, well, actually February of this year, to bring the total to 5. Really not a lot of changes in this budget, other than you'll see on line 51, the boat ramp maintenance projected this year is $10,000, which is almost more than double. It's more than double what we allocated. That's because we chose to install a drinking fountain down there, purchase and get a drinking fountain installed down there at the boat ramp because there's been quite a number of requests for that. People floating down the river, wanting to stop at the boat ramp, get some fresh water to continue on. We don't currently have it available, so we will have it available here soon, this summer. The other item I wanted to point out is line 68, an allocation of $50,000. That's the beginning of the sinking fund for the turf field replacements. That's a new item in this year, obviously because of the turf field project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lawyer, on, I think it is, where did I just see that? On line 19, what is the 1.3 million in unanticipated expenses? It was 50,000 last year was projected, and now it's 1.3 million.
I'm not sure, I'm lost. What page are you on?
Park Improvement Fund?
No, we're Park Services Fund.
Oh, we're in Park Services?
Yes.
Oh, just kidding.
That's the next one.
I was running ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I know what, turf field replacement, where was I looking at?
Mr. Thompson.
Okay,
I'll come
thank
back to you, Councilor Cross, if you'd like.
Nope, that's perfect.
Not sure if this is a question for Mr. Lawyer or for Mr. Brown, but are the rental fees for the turf fields captured somewhere?
They are not.
Okay.
They are not because they have not been established yet, because we're in the process of having a request for proposals out for operations. Those aren't back in. We don't know, we just don't know. So they're not included in this at this time.
But is this fund where they would go?
Depends, it really depends. If the facility is managed by a third party, the fees would go to them first and then maybe back to the city. If the city's gonna manage the facility and assess the fees, then they would go in here, yes. But we're unsure yet which model we're going to operate under.
Mr. Wood? Ms. Christopher?
So what's the, on line 67 then, what's the operating contingency? That's just whichever one moves forward, whether it's in-house or whether it's third party, or what is that?
That's general park system contingency.
Oh, that's not the fields.
That's not the fields, that's just the
Okay.
general park system.
Okay.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lawyer, line 44, developers tree expenses. I noticed you budgeted last year 20,000. You're only projected to spend 4,800, and so you're budgeting 20,000 again?
Mm-hmm.
You
Thank you.
care
Good
to
question.
elaborate?
Good question. I'm happy to elaborate. The developer's tree expenses is where we show spending money given to the city by developers when they can't replace the trees on their development property per the city regulations, okay? When a development comes in, they're required to give us a tree removal plan. For every tree they take down that is a significant tree, they have to replace 2 to 1. If they don't have room on their site to do that, and most developments don't, I'll be real honest with you, then they pay into a fund to the city to put trees on city property other places. And so that fund is a variable amount every fiscal year, okay? We never know how much we're gonna get. We never know how much, really, we're gonna get on any given year because we don't know what development's coming in, but when we do the budgets. And so I believe there's actually more money available in that fund than $20,000, but I don't think we practically can spend more than $20,000 and plant trees in a given fiscal cycle. So that's why I put it at $20,000.
But you don't have any money coming in?
Oh, yeah, we do.
Well,
It's
I'm
back
looking at
on-
it, developer tree reimbursements has a proposed zero.
Oh, yeah, that's because there's nothing that I know is gonna happen next year. Again, this goes like the SDCs we talked about earlier. I don't project revenues, we don't project revenues in things like this that we don't know we're going to get. So we are likely to get some money, but we really don't know.
Okay, but we're gonna spend it.
Yeah, we have to spend it, yeah.
We have to spend it?
We are bound to spend that money on planting trees throughout the
So-
city, on city property or city rights of way.
I I understand that, but we're budgeting to spend, and I'm only asking because we're talking about money, right? On a water fee increase. So I'm trying to understand why we budgeted 20,000 last year. We've only spent 4,800. Are we expected to spend the other 15,200 in a month and a half?
Mr. Wood.
Just to follow up on your line of thought here, I do appreciate that. On line 4, we have a beginning opening balance. Those are restricted dollars. So that 20,000 that we're pulling from is actually from those restricted dollars. So we can't use them for anything else. So
okay,
we're kind of stuck. But good thoughts.
Okay, darn, trying to find money. I'm just trying to find.
Thank you, Tim. I was just going to mention that, and I put $20,000 in the budget to give us plenty of spending authority because we're going to use some of those funds for the wetlands project, okay? Some of the trees that are going in there are going to be paid out of this fund. We may be able to buy those next fiscal year to be planted for that project. So
got it.
When that comes along and is in line, we'll use a lot of this money down there for the trees planted on that project.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have some other questions.
Okay.
Thank you. 6,000 last projected to spend on the amphitheater and 10,000 budgeted this next year.
Yes.
When I'm just asking for a little more detail. So if people are looking at home and they see the differences, we know what they are, not just a yes or no.
The big difference is we didn't have a lot of activity in the amphitheater this year, no concert series, so the need to do maintenance and higher level of maintenance and improvements and repairs weren't there. I expect we're going to see some concerts this summer, so we should have, well, I hope we don't have additional maintenance, obviously, I hope that, but the money's allocated to take care of it if we do.
And then how about the grant program? We budgeted an extra 5,000.
Didn't really budget an extra 5,000. We budgeted $15,000 and we've done that for many years. Unfortunately, at this time, we're not aware of more than $10,000 in grants being approved by the Parks Board. There's still a chance before the end of June that they'll get another Eagle Scout to walk in the door and say, I can get this done, I need $5,000 and I can get it done by the end of June. So the projected expenses are what we know about as we put the budget together. And the Parks Board has asked many, many years in a row for us to allocate the $15,000 for them to use in their grant program.
Okay, and then the last one, the 25,000 on the park rental program expenses. Is that what we were talking about earlier? On what goes back in? Or I just don't, 12,000 projected this year, up more than double next year.
Again, I budget $25,000 every year, so we have plenty of money for unforeseen expenses like a heating system failure, those kind of things. We didn't have much of that this year, and so I want to have the allocation available to maintain our rental properties if something catastrophic happens, okay? We may have a roof fail that we have to replace the roof that we're not expecting to, those kinds of things, that's why I budget that money the way we do.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Clark, did you have a
No, I'm good.
Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this is a question for Mr. Wood. So over there on the far column where it says percentage change to prior budget, like for example, those that Councilor Starr were asking about are saying 0% change when it went from 6,000 to 10,000. Or is it from the budgeted versus the projected?
What we're trying to look at, good question.
Okay.
Many years ago, Chief Teague pushed me to make a change. Previously, we did projected to proposed budget. And, in my mind, that always made more sense. But he pushed me to say, hey, we really want to compare service level to service level. So that's why we changed that column to go from percent change from prior budget to the current budget. So you're looking at the budgeted 23, 24, in some of these lines where, let's say, the park rental program, line 54, the 25,000, which was budgeted compared to the proposed budget, 25,000. So that's why you're seeing a 0% increase. And it's just to, again, to be able to compare service levels a little bit easier.
Okay, I understand that.
Good question, though.
No, yeah.
Any other questions? I have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the Park Service Fund as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Park improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Park Improvement Fund, that's the project fund. Those are SDCs collected for multifamily and residential development. Commercial development does not pay parks SDCs. We project the same number of single-family homes. I use the same theory when projecting the revenues for next year. Again, you'll see the current year, we projected $30,000. We took in $180,000. Those are apartment projects that we didn't expect to come in. Expenditures for this year, the improvements that we're doing for this year include 13.6% of the cost of the pickleball courts and parking lot at Keizer Rapids Park, and also the turf fields. As those bills come in for the turf field project, the parks, this fund pays 13.6% of those costs. Looking in next year, you'll see a large amount of money in unanticipated expenses. That's pretty typical for this fund. That makes them available should something come up, property purchase, things like that, that we don't count on or don't know about putting the budget together, but it puts them in a place that they're available should an opportunity arise. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think this is for Mr. Wood. So line number 12 is transfers in. Is that 2.3? Is that the ARPA funds?
What page are you on?
135? Oh, sorry, I'm all over. It's past, I'm sorry, but,
There is no 12.
Okay.
okay, just kidding.
I would love that kind of transfers. Where's the money?
Okay, that's my question in like 5 minutes. Okay, line 19, that's what, 1.3 million. What's this unanticipated expenses?
As I just mentioned, that is allocated for opportunities that arise in the given fiscal year that we don't know about. It might be a property purchase. Just don't know. We try to put pretty much the balance of this fund in unanticipated expenses so that it's available. If we put it in ending fund balance, it's not available. We have to wait a whole nother fiscal cycle to access those funds.
I totally get that. So have you ever used it?
Oh yeah, we've used it on a few occasions over my career.
And then and the Park Services Fund, how much do we get for that per year?
Parks.
No, we don't have a sound problem.
We have new bases, Shaney. The Park Services Fund, how much do we get per year in Park Services fees is what I meant, sorry.
Oh, that's back on page.
So that's not on this one?
No, that's a separate
Okay,
fund.
the other one.
To answer your question, Park Services fees, $684,500.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Christopher.
So Bill, what, how come you don't have a number on line 19 for actual 21, 22, and 22, 23?
Because we didn't use it.
You mean you didn't set anything aside?
No, we didn't spend any.
So how long's this money been sitting there?
It's been growing for the last 20 years.
How many?
20 years.
20 years?
Yes, ma'am. Remember the old SDC money and the new SDC money?
Yes.
Okay, this is all new SDC money, okay? The challenge that we had with spending these funds was we didn't have any money to match with it. The park system didn't have any money. When the parks fees were implemented, I started to say integrated, implemented, that gave us funds to build things with, make improvements, make additions. When we make additions, pickleball courts at Keizer Rapids Park, the big toy, which the big toy doesn't count because that was a volunteer, that was a separate project.
So what could you spend that $1.3 million on?
There are projects identified in the STC methodology report that are growth related, okay? Any growth related project is eligible for SDC expenditures. At
So is that
Keizer,
pickleball courts?
yes, at Keizer Rapids Park, and they're different by park, okay? At Keizer Rapids Park, 13.6% of the cost of an improvement at Keizer Rapids, because everything at Keizer Rapids is considered growth-related, okay? 13.6% of those project costs are eligible for parks SDC expenditures. In other parks in the system, and there aren't very many that have allowance for SDC expenditures because they're not growth-related. We replaced the play structure at Ben Miller Park last year, okay, for instance. That wasn't eligible. It was not growth-related. We just replaced it. Without the park's fees, we wouldn't have been able to replace it, okay? So this fund has been building and building for years with our really not having an ability to use it. The park's fees has helped us, and this turf field project has helped us immensely in using these funds.
The Turf Fields project has helped
The
us?
Turf Fields project has helped us immensely.
Because we can use
We
how
can
much
use
of this?
13.6%, 13.6% of that project cost can be
Okay.
paid for out of this fund, and we plan to do that.
Jeez.
And again, as I mentioned, this problem, if you will,
It's a problem.
it has been. It's been a
huge
decades-long
number
problem.
that is dead.
But now we have the opportunity to use these funds to benefit the community in growth-related projects.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair.
Let me, if I may, the other thing that is eligible for this is land purchase. I mentioned earlier, in the stormwater portion about the wetlands project, we bought some property, or are buying some property from the developer to add to our project. The purchase price for that ground is coming out of this fund.
The whole amount or 13%?
The whole amount.
Oh.
Because it's identified in the Parks Master Plan as a goal, and the 100% of the land acquisition costs are SDC eligible. So this fund's paying to buy that ground.
And I'm sure I missed this, but could you describe SDC? What does that mean? Sorry.
Systems development charges, okay? Those are fees paid by development for growth of the systems, where it's a water system, stormwater system, which Keizer does not have a stormwater SDC, sanitary sewer, transportation, and parks. Those are the common SDCs. Some agencies and jurisdictions have a school SDC. We don't, but typically, again, it's water, stormwater, transportation, and parks.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So one more question. So if we were able to do a UGB expansion, we could use this money to build a new park. We could use 100% of it. I'm
going to say no. We could not, because, and here's why.
I feel like I'm in jeopardy.
Well,
Bill, if you put it into the master plan and it was capacity increasing.
I was going to say, under current documentation and current studies and current council-adopted allocations, we could not. We would have to update the Parks Master Plan and update the Parks Methodology Report to allow the use of those funds, okay? Because the methodology report was done based on the current urban growth boundary. Didn't look at an expansion or anything like that. So without updating the Parks Master Plan and the Parks STC methodology, these funds could not be used outside the current UGB.
Can you update the Parks SDC methodology without an update of the Parks Master Plan?
Yes.
Thank you.
But that, again, would only include properties inside the current UGB.
Oh, for God's sake.
Are there any other questions? Jane?
Oh, I'm just rounding because I'm so confused about, so we have, just to summarize, we have $1.3 million that's been sitting here for 20 years that we can't spend.
We can now.
Well, a little bit.
Well, no, a lot of it. About $800,000 based on the turf field cost, the total turf field project, not what we're doing right now, okay? But the total project's probably about $800,000 available in STC funds.
Bill, can I take a crack too, just for fun? Okay, so system development charges are basically charges that you get to charge a developer for putting pressure on any system.
Right.
And the park system is one system. But if you charge them for pressure on that system, you have to come up with the number you're going to charge them through a methodology.
Right.
And then you have to have a plan in place, your Parks Master Plan, that has the capital improvements you can actually spend and how much you can spend per. And so they're super restricted. So it isn't that it's sitting there wasting anything, it's just, it has to follow that plan unless you change that plan. And it just so happens that those plans are really expensive to change. And you're usually trying to get through that plan. It's like 20 years of stuff. So we're working on trying to spend that money, but you have to make sure, opportunities come up and maybe you can expand that plan a little bit without going back to the drawing board. But after a while, you either have to redo your plan or you have to, frankly, you have to give the money back eventually. So you want to.
How long do you have to give the money back?
Well, maybe I shouldn't have spoken. It's a good practice to redo your plans between 10 and 15 years so that you don't run into that problem. There,
You have to
Clark.
give the money back. Okay.
Thank you. But piggybacking on that, yes, we've been able to move some things through, and Ms. Christopher may remember the joyous conversations we had around Keizer Rapids Park and how much we could and how much we couldn't use on the creation of that park. But I'll also point out for everybody that no SDC dollars can be used to maintain those things once you build them. That goes back to the previous page. So we built Keizer Rapids Park. We did all these wonderful things, but then you have to maintain them. And that's where you get into the line item or the fund we just approved, so we can keep it going. So I just want to make that distinction.
Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more comment I wanted to make. We were talking about updating policy or updating plans. I actually learned about a year ago that we could update our Parks STC methodology and free up some money. In other words, the new rules are looser than they used to be.
Yeah.
I elected
you can't
not.
spend money.
I elected not to spend that money and update the plan because we had the turf field project on board.
Right.
And I knew we could use a bulk of these funds on that project. I thought it made sense to finish the turf field project, see where we're at, final numbers, and then maybe we look at updating the methodology to free up the use of the rest of that money.
Well,
So I
that's
just
the
wanted
best
to
thing
share
you
that with
said
the
all
committee.
Council President Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just, it's after 9 and I have my pumpkin hat on that or I don't have it on, but hopefully I have it with me. I should put it on. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So the question I have, you mentioned, I heard you say $800,000. Well, and before I go there, this is why we need the dog here, Chief Copeland, the emotional support dog. I'm just going to say these conversations.
Seriously, or an adult beverage.
Yeah. I think the dog's legal, more legal. Anyway, so I heard you say, Mr. Lair, $800,000 for the turf field. And I just want to clarify that I'm reading this correctly. You have $400,000 for the turf fields, which you have marked in line 18 for the turf fields. Is the other 400,000 to get to the 800 in the unanticipated expenses?
Oh, good question.
No, actually, line 18 is partially the turf field, but it's also the rest of the pickleball courts and parking.
Okay, well, that's not what the budget note says.
When I put the budget together, I'd anticipated the pickleball courts would be done by the end of June. They're not going to be. So part of that's going to be in there, okay?
Okay.
So yes, actually, to answer your question, the $400,000 is for the turf fields for the current phase.
Okay.
Okay, this is the phase that we know what the bids are, we know what the numbers are. The balance of $400,000 to make the 800 is for phase 2 and phase 3 of the
Is what?
project. For phase 2 and phase 3 portions of the
And that's going to
project.
come out of the 1.3?
Yes,
Good catch.
yes.
Thank you.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair. So maybe this is just not a great idea, but who decides what those SDCs are for the developers who come in and who determines? This is probably Shane.
The SDC methodology report establishes the fee. And the fee is increased annually based on the CPI.
But if we've had all this money sitting here for 20 years, maybe we're not, why are we charging them? Maybe we would get more development if it wasn't so expensive because of those fees. I don't want to lose money, but I don't like, 20 years of money sitting there when.
I didn't like it either.
Right.
I didn't, and I tried every opportunity we had that was presented to use these funds. And again, as I mentioned earlier, until we had the parks fee, we had very, very, very few opportunities. With the parks fee, we had more and more and more, and we've been able to use some of these funds. And again, I'll reiterate, the turf field project gives us an opportunity that, we wouldn't have normally. And that's a good thing, because we should use these dollars. We should put them to use. We can't stop collecting them just because we're not sure how we're going to use them. Without changing the methodology.
Right, but maybe we need to look at the methodology since we have 20 years worth of knowing
And I will
the
say
problem.
that's the same thing on transportation, water, sewer, storm drain. Those are a little more definitive as far as their gross impacts to those systems. That's why those funds are easier to use. But new development coming to the city, no matter residential development, I got to emphasize, because if we're talking about parks, they place a demand on the system, and I believe they have a responsibility to pay for improvements based on their demand. So they shouldn't just get a free ride. They should continue to pay the fees. We, as the organization in the city, just need to put together an updated plan to show how we can use those funds.
Ms. London?
Okay, my question is, that's a lot of money. Is it invested until we use it? I read earlier in the book that we do invest some funds. We are averaging about 5%. So if it's sitting there for 20 years and we could have been earning some interest on it, are we doing that?
We are doing that. And if you see on line 7, that's interest on that money. That's interest revenue based on that fund.
Okay, so it's not just
It's not just sitting
in a
there,
hole
no.
somewhere.
It's just not just sitting there. It's earning us some money while it's sitting there, yes.
But it's set.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I propose we approve the Parks Improvement Fund as submitted.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Park Improvements has passed. Now, Mr. Wood, is this where we have a break?
I would concur. We're probably done for the night. We're about where we need to be. This is where we have historically stopped after the first night of budget deliberations.
So I would like to just say thank you, everybody, for your input, your questions, and your helping me figure out what I'm doing. I see that we have, do we need to pass around the pumpkin hat, or are we just okay with that? Okay, we stand adjourned.